Council meeting for October 4th, 2021. Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Yes, thank you. Mayor Robinson?
Here.
Deputy Mayor Neuenhouse?
Here.
Councilmember Barksdale?
Here.
Councilmember Lee?
Here.
Councilmember Robertson?
I'm here.
Councilmember Stokes?
Here.
And Councilmember Zahn?
Here.
Thank you.
Councilmember Stokes, could you please lead us in the flag salute?
Yes, Mayor, thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. So we have two proclamations tonight. The first one is Walk and Bike to School Day. Councilmember Barksdale, would you read that for us, please?
Yes, Mayor. Thank you. Let me just scroll back up. Whereas all children benefit when communities take steps to make pedestrian safety a priority. And whereas physical activity such as walking or biking to school plays a leading role in reducing the rates of obesity, diabetes, and other health problems among children. And whereas an important role for parents and caregivers is to teach children about pedestrian safety and the health benefits related to physical activity. And whereas Walk to School Day in October has proven to be helpful in encouraging children to safely walk to school or the school bus, and in creating and promoting local safe routes to school programs across the United States and globally. And whereas walking and bicycling as modes of transportation can relieve traffic congestion and offer environmental benefits. And whereas this year's walk is coordinated by Bellevue School Pool, a collaboration between Bellevue, King County Metro, and Bellevue School District to encourage families and students to explore sustainable transportation options. Now, therefore, I, on behalf of Lynn Robinson, Mayor of the City of Bellevue, Washington, and on behalf of its City Council, do hereby proclaim October 6, 2021 as Bellevue School Pool Walk to School Day. I encourage everyone to consider the safety and health of children traveling to and from school today and every day.
Thank you. Councilmember Lee, can you please read the Domestic Violence Action Month proclamation?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Whereas domestic violence is a serious crime that affects 1 in 4 women and 1 in 7 men during their lifetime through severe physical violence. And whereas on average, 20 people per minute experience sexual assault, physical violence, or stalking by intimate partner in the US. That's more than 10 million people a year. And whereas domestic violence is widespread and has a devastating impact on survivors, children, families, and our community. And whereas domestic violence does not discriminate and crosses all economic, racial, gender, educational, religious, and societal barriers, and is sustained by indifference. And whereas ending the cycle of this vicious crime requires the courage of survivors and the support of the larger community. And whereas education, prevention, and intervention efforts to end the cycle of domestic violence are imperative to not only protect survivors, but also to increase public awareness of the severity and extent of domestic violence. Now, therefore, on behalf of the Mayor of the City of Bellevue, Lynn Robinson, Washington, and on behalf of the City Council, I do hereby proclaim the month of October 2021 as Domestic Violence Action Month in Bellevue. I urge all citizens to speak out against domestic violence and support local efforts, including those by LifeWire, an agency that provides domestic violence survivors support from housing to legal advocacy to mental health therapy towards preventing and ending domestic abuse in our communities and increasing public awareness of and action on this issue. We encourage survivors, their loved ones, and concerned citizens to learn more by calling the LifeWire helpline at 425-746-1940 or by visiting www.lifewire.org Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Lee. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
I move to approve the agenda.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Clerk, do we have anybody signed up for oral communications?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. We've had a couple of withdrawals from the pre-registered list, but we still have 7 speakers this evening for oral communications. And with that, I will call the first speaker, who is Mon Wig. Mr. Wig, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Excellent. Your time begins now.
Thank you. This is Mon Wig. My address is 4811 134th Place, Southeast Bellevue. We want to thank staff and council for all their continued hard work on East Maine. We agree with council's emphasis on delivering housing and affordable housing in East Maine. We also agree with most of staff's recommendations in option B. We are requesting only a few modifications to staff's suggestions. These 3 discussion items tonight are FAR, amenity system, and development agreement. Tonight, Heartland will discuss FAR in more detail, and I will discuss amenities and DA. Regarding amenities, the draft LUCA awards more points to amenities constructed with non-residential development than to amenities built with residential development. This penalizes residential development, especially in early phases. For example, if we build a large open space for residential, we earn less points than if we built the same open space with an office or hotel phase first. We recommend awarding the same points for both residential and non-residential since the cost to build the amenity is the same. We suggest staff consider adding enhanced streetscape, which is a top tier amenity in downtown, and which provides 4 to 6 feet of additional space for outdoor seating and activated ground level space, as well as pedestrian bridge, which adds to public safety to the top tier. Regarding DA, staff memo mentions increased height and increased FAR can be approved in the DA with other conditions. We appreciate that. We request to specify those conditions now for increased height and increased FAR so it can provide more certainty, is easier and less time consuming later. We request the height to be subject only to SEPA review since additional height on 114th and Maine with shorter heights along 112th will provide quicker housing, greater ambience, and more light and air in the site. Any additional FAR can be subject to additional housing requirement. We also recommend that we stick to the recommended date of December 6th to complete the LUCA, even if it takes more council meetings between now and then. We are in year 7 of this rezone effort. Thank you for your support during the 7 years, and we look forward to working with staff and the council to complete the rezone this year. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Wig. The next speaker on the list is Bill Thurston. And Mr. Thurston, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Thank you. Your time begins now.
Okay, Honorable Mayor, members of the council, thank you for the opportunity to provide a few comments. I'm Bill Thurston and speaking on behalf of the Bellevue Club. Wig Properties in their letter dated October 2nd has provided to the council and the city their recommendations to support the vision they hope to create for the commercial area of the TOD. We support those recommendations. In particular, they are recommending raising the base FAR to 3.5 for non-residential only. Doing so will make these areas more competitive with properties north of Maine because other costly incentive requirements to support commercial interests would not be required. We concur with this. The report correctly points out that the downtown markets such as Lincoln Square and other developments can attract higher rents than East Maine. We concur with this for commercial, residential, and hospitality areas. This area must be more cost effective to compete with these alternatives, not less. The Bellevue Club is a very limited area upon which to support new development suitable for our community. Unfortunately, any development to be undertaken must be built on very costly structured parking. This is a very high bar to overcome, and the cost of our poor soils was also not reflected in the staff's economic analysis. A minimum non-residential base FAR of 3.5 is needed to avoid delaying development, which would also delay the delivery of housing. Our vision is to protect the club we have today and enhance this to support a larger community and athletic facility. We also intend to provide residential accommodations consistent with the goals of this district. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Thurston. The next speaker on our list is Lee Streier. Mr. Streier, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Perfect. Your time begins now.
My name is Lee Streier. I reside at 3620 Southwest Holden Street in Seattle, Washington. I'm a senior project manager for Heartland LLC, a real estate advisory firm that's worked with the city of Bellevue many times, including an analysis we did for the East Maine area a few years ago. We were engaged by Wig Properties to perform a peer review of the Eco Northwest study that was commissioned by the city's planning department to assist in establishing the staff proposed FAR limits for the East Maine district. The current staff proposed base FAR for the East Maine district is 2.5 for non-residential and 3.5 for residential, with a max FAR of 5.0, which is achievable via bonuses, including the provision of open space and affordable housing, among others. In effect, this max FAR will be less here due to reductions created by critical areas within the property boundaries. To arrive at the recommended base and max FAR, the Eco Northwest analysis examined a series of potential development parcels within the East Maine district. These parcels assumed development blocks that average approximately 60,000 square feet and assumed a basic level of urban infrastructure in place, such as streets and utilities that serve these development blocks. The East Maine properties do not have this base level of infrastructure. They're currently large super blocks, and the cost to upgrade infrastructure up to this base condition assumed in the Eco Northwest study will be greater than $50 million. If you include just this infrastructure upgrade cost in the analysis, the minimum FAR needed to incentivize redevelopment would be approximately 3.5 for non-residential development. This does not even factor in the amount of time required to build out the base infrastructure. And in the case of the existing property owner, the loss of income from existing buildings on the site that would be associated with this additional time requirement. Additionally, by setting the base FAR lower than adjacent districts, not only is the cost of the infrastructure an issue, but now additional costs must be incurred just to raise the base density up from the staff proposed FAR of 2.5 to the adjacent district base FAR of 4.5. This added cost required to achieve the same density that would be allowed by right in adjacent districts without added costs will delay development in the East Maine district, as properties in the adjacent districts will have a competitive advantage in the form of lower costs that can be passed on as lower occupancy costs. Finally, by limiting the max FAR in the East Maine district, which as I mentioned earlier, would be effectively 4.7 due to the presence of the critical areas, the city would be capping the amount of housing that can be created through bonus incentives. By increasing the max FAR, it would allow for a more vibrant mixed-use community. Thank you for your time. I appreciated the opportunity to speak to you this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Streier. The next speaker on the list is Barbara Brun. Ms. Brun, can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you. Your time begins now.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and council members. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Barbara Brun. I am a longtime resident and run my business in Bellevue. I am here tonight to urge the council to prioritize updating our tree land use code and to amend the biennium budget to complete this work in 2022. As you know, Bellevue has a tree canopy goal of 40%. Meeting this goal assumes we retain the trees we have and that we add to our canopy. Unfortunately, many trends are threatening tree retention, such as unprecedented commercial and residential development, as well as climate change. Efforts to plant new trees by the city and groups like 300 Trees have not yet ramped up to increase the tree canopy or offset the rapid rate of tree loss and removal. We cannot wait until after the boom times to address tree retention, protection, and health. We must do so concurrently with the development. Bellevue's tree land use code has several deficiencies and loopholes that are allowing far too much tree removal. Our neighbors to the north, Kirkland and Redmond, share our tree canopy goal of 40%. They have similar tree land use codes that are more stringent than Bellevue's. Redmond is currently updating its tree canopy goal and will adopt it in Q1 of 2022. To catch up quickly, I suggest Bellevue adopt verbatim Redmond's updated tree code. This would be expeditious and ensure Eastside consistency on rules for developers and property owners. As you know, residents care deeply about our city and a park and want to maintain this defining character as we grow into the future. Time is of the essence, given the pace of development. Please make this a priority in 2022 and act during this year's budget update. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Brun. The next speaker on the list is Cheryl Pietromonaco. And Ms. Pietromonaco, I do not see you connected via name. If you are the telephone listener, could you use *9 to raise your hand, please? Okay, I do not see a hand. I'll move on to the next speaker, which is Jack McCullough. Mr. McCullough, can you hear me?
I can. Thank you very much, Charmaine.
You're welcome. Your time begins now.
Right. First of all, this is going to eat into my time, but I wanted to do a shout out, Charmaine, to you. I think the email that you sent out to the group of us who were speakers outlining the process for how to engage in this speaking exercise today was excellent, and I think should be an example used in the future. So thank you very much. I signed up to express a concern about East Maine with respect to one issue. We've been working on this, as Mon said, for 7 years. And, I think we've tried to get to predictability, to certainty about most every issues, and we're down to issues of height and FAR. And I think we know what the questions are here about, how to move the dial to trigger extra height and how to move the dial to trigger extra FAR. But we're in a position now where it looks like we're going to have to move these off to the development agreement process, right, in the future. And what I think my advice to council is, let's not do Groundhog Day here. Let's not put something in place where we come back 2 years from now in front of you and we're trying to reinvent something from scratch. I think on the height issue, it's really clear that we have SEPA work to do and that there are benefits to the height issue that need to be evaluated from iconic building size, from lower heights on 112th, and from earlier development of housing on the west side of the site. And likewise, on the FAR side, I think there's an exchange to be made between greater FAR and housing and affordable housing, just like there is downtown. So if we know what the quid pro quos are, my suggestion is, why don't we build those now into the development agreement structure? Ordinarily, your development agreement process would start from scratch and say, public benefits could be anything at all, but we've spent 7 years and we know what this trade-off is going to be. So I would suggest a direction to staff to say, when we develop this development agreement language for the code, that we create some sideboards and we say, here's when the council looks at these development agreements in the future, or this development agreement in the future, here's the scope of benefits we should be looking at, so that we're not just starting this process entirely over again. I mean, we've all devoted an enormous amount of time and effort to this very productively, I think, and I think this will help us in the future move this process along with the kind of predictability and the public benefits that we've already identified that can be achieved here. So thank you very much for your time tonight.
Thank you, Mr. McCullough. The next speaker on the list is Christian Dorset. And Mr. Dorset, I do not see you connected by name. If you are connected with a phone, please use *9 to raise your hand. And I do not see a hand. That is the end of our pre-registered list for oral communications. We have a few minutes left. If there's anyone connected to this call who would like to make oral communications, please use the raise hand function. And I see one hand, and that is Miss Dean. Can you hear me, Miss Dean?
I can.
Okay, your time begins now.
Great, thanks so much. Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and council members. Construction on the Newport Hills Neighborhood Park is supposed to begin tomorrow. And I spoke to you on September 7th regarding my concern that our park planner included 18 to 21 parking spaces in the plans, which contradicts parking needs for a neighborhood park as defined in the city's 2016 Parks and Open Spaces System Plan. That number of parking spaces also contradicts the 2019 Parks Board's declaration that they did not intend to create a destination park or an attractant for those outside the neighborhood when they voted to approve an oversized dog area. This is a snippet from the existing city parks plan. Neighborhood parks are intended mainly as walk-to or bike-to facilities. Therefore, they have no or limited off-street parking. In general, these parks should not create parking or traffic impacts to the neighborhoods in which they're located. So I didn't expect a response from you during the September 7th meeting, but it is disappointing that every one of you stayed silent on this issue rather than addressing it with the park planner and his supervisor. You stayed silent when the Parks Board, with the exception of board members Hamilton and Heath, opted to ignore the neighborhood park designation. And the result was a park plan for Newport Hills that's more about servicing dog owners from outside our neighborhood than the recreation needs of the Newport Hills residents. So I ask again, where is the parking study referenced by the park planner? Because it wasn't in any of the documentation that he presented to council, parks boards, or the neighborhood. How is the need for 18 to 21 parking spots at a neighborhood park determined? And who's he building those parking spaces for? Why won't you ask those questions? At least 3 of you have previously served on the Parks Board, and most of you have acted as the council liaison to that board. So I know you're familiar with that parks plan. You know that the park plan you approved for Newport Hills violates the neighborhood park designation. You know that 18 to 21 parking spots violates the parks designation. But why do you continue to stay silent instead of standing up for Newport Hills residents after our 11-year wait for our neighborhood park? You still have time to fix the glaring issues that you ignored. Will you do the right thing for Newport Hills, or will you continue to remain silent while asking for our votes every time you run for office? Finally, please address the need for more off-leash dog areas around the city in the upcoming 2022 Parks and Open Spaces Plan update. Newport Hills shouldn't have to shoulder that burden alone. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dean. And at this time, I do see Ms. Pietromonaco connected. Ms. Pietromonaco, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, great. Your time begins now.
Okay, thank you. I wanted to mention about smart water meters. I've done this once before, but I thought I'd do it one more time. Some of the people aren't aware of a site called Electric Sense. It's called Lloyd at electricsense.com. It has a whole bunch of information, and that's LLOYD at electricsense.com. It has a bunch of information for people who are sensitive to EMF, such as myself. And also, I found out from Harvest Harmonics, which is the company that set up a coupling on the irrigation system of a farmer that I know in northeastern Washington, that one coupling sends out electromagnetic frequencies that are healing. They're called Kemenasi waves all over his farm. So even one coupling can extend through acreage. So when people told me that a smart water meter wouldn't affect my home, obviously electromagnetic frequencies can travel through water. And because the smart water meter will be right next to the water and in contact with the water in the sense that it will be monitoring how much water usage, I asked a smart meter electrician, or rather an electrical engineer, whether these EMF frequencies will go into the water. And he said very likely. Since I have 3 types of plumbing in my home, and because I'm electromagnetically sensitive, as a lot of people are, if you go on this Lloyd@electricsense.com, you'll just see how big of an issue this is for a lot of people. I am very disturbed about the idea that my water will have a signature, an electromagnetic frequency signature. The other thing I found out just recently was that harvestharmonics.com sent a sample of their electromagnetic frequency water to Italy, and it retained the signature, the electromagnetic frequency signature, for 2 weeks, and it could have been longer. And they said that it would keep that signature as long as there was no end date to that. It's kind of like homeopathic. So a lot of you people must be familiar with that, where they have an energy signature, these little pellets that you put under your tongue, and they are treatment for a lot of different conditions. These treatments, these pellets hold their electric signature, their energy signature forever. So doing this to the water is going to introduce electromagnetic frequencies that are not healing. 5G, cell phones, cell towers, all that is not healing. So we are actually going to contaminate our water. Now, I understand the reasons why we're doing this. I understand that it's more efficient and we get to monitor the system better and we know when there's been a spill or when there's a leak or whatever. But that's at the cost of good, healthy water. And unfortunately for me, drinking water that has an electromagnetic frequency signature along with everybody else that is sensitive to this is like a death sentence to us. When the cell tower was put in 900 feet from my home, I didn't sleep for a month and a half. I almost went crazy trying to figure out what was wrong with me. And I finally talked to a girlfriend who's electromagnetically sensitive, and she sent me to this site. And I found out how to protect myself. The first night, I slept 28 hours.
I'm
the
sorry.
Second night, 14 hours.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
You're well over the 3 minutes.
Anyway, I just want you to know that we're harming ourselves doing this. And it's not just me, it's you guys too.
If you want to send an email with the full communication, we'd love to read it.
Oh, I've sent you guys emails. My lawyer has sent emails. He sent a letter to you. I mean, you all got this information. I'm kind of surprised you would even say that because all of you should have gotten this by now. He sent it out the 30th of September. I'm trying to end the
conversation, and I'm trying to let you have a way to finish it in another way. So thank you for speaking tonight.
Okay, so I'm hoping you guys will factor this in.
Thank you, Ms. Pietro-Monaco. At this point, there are no others connected to this phone call who have not made oral communications. So Mayor, that would close oral comms.
Okay, thank you very much. We are on to the report of our city manager, and I think Mr. Miyake has some good news for us tonight.
Yes, thank you, Mayor and council members. Yes, that's right. We have a couple great news stories to share with you this evening. The first one is a good news story to share with the council on an outstanding service award we recently given to a member of our city attorney's office. With that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Kathy Gerla, our city attorney, to not only introduce the topic, but also to introduce the employee. This is very, very timely given the Domestic Violence Month proclamation that was just read. Kathy?
Thank you, Mr. Miyake. Good evening, Mayor and council members. I am very pleased to have the opportunity tonight to let you know about the award that was received by the City of Bellevue's domestic violence prosecutor, Bree Hopkins. And Bree is here tonight joining me. And in a few minutes, I'll turn it over to her to say a few words. But before doing that, I want to let you know a little bit about the award. Bree recently, as the city manager said, received the Outstanding Service Award, which is an annual award given out by the Washington State Association of Municipal Attorneys. And since that's a mouthful, it's also known as WSAMA. And WSAMA is an organization broadly based that is made up of attorneys who represent a number of cities and towns throughout the state. And their mission is to provide a forum for attorneys to collaborate on what can be thorny municipal issues, as well as to educate municipal attorneys. And this particular award is given to attorneys in recognition of their significant contributions to both individual municipalities that the attorney may serve, as well as to WSAMA's work and the solution of municipal problems throughout the state of Washington. And Bree in particular is being recognized as Mr. Miyake indicated, for her dedicated work on domestic violence issues, both locally and at the regional and state levels. And this recognition is timely, given that, as the council just proclaimed, it is Domestic Violence Action Month. As the council's recognized, domestic violence is a serious issue that is deserving of dedicated attention and efforts. And that's what Bree has done throughout much of her professional career. She's brought dedicated attention and efforts to resolving domestic violence issues. For most of her career, she specialized in handling domestic violence cases, and both first for the city of Everett, and then in the recent past for the city, and currently for the city of Bellevue. And in that role, she handles all of Bellevue's domestic violence cases. These are, as you might imagine, complex and difficult cases. And on average, she's responsible for handling about 250 of those a year. She's done an outstanding job in that capacity. The cases include helping victims understand the process and receive services, as well as seeking fair resolutions and holding offenders accountable. And she also serves on Bellevue's domestic violence task force and helps formulate and implement a coordinated community response to domestic violence issues in Bellevue. And then in addition to that day-to-day prosecution responsibility, she also is being honored for her contributions at the regional and state level. For a number of years, she served on the King County Regional Domestic Violence Task Force. She's assisted, along with the King County Prosecutor's Office and the Washington State Coalition Against Domestic Violence, in putting together an annual symposium to help educate people from all sorts of disciplines who deal with domestic issues, from medical professionals to social workers to attorneys and others. And she has also worked on state legislative efforts, was asked to serve as a member of a legislatively established task force to assist our state legislature in understanding some of these domestic violence issues. And finally, Bree's been very active in WSAMA itself. She served as a board member and for a number of years, and she also has and continues to significantly contribute to WSAMA's mission by presenting and planning a number of educational seminars for attorneys on domestic violence issues. So in summary, this award is a well-deserved honor and recognition by Bree's professional peers of her outstanding contributions on these domestic violence issues. And again, I appreciate the opportunity to be able to recognize her and share that information with you this evening. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Bree to say a few words.
Thank you, Kathy. I appreciate the kind words. Good evening, Mayor Robinson and council members. Over the past 14 and a half years, I have devoted much of my work as a domestic violence prosecutor. As Kathy indicated, I've worked in Bellevue for approximately 7 years. Prior to working in Bellevue, I was the domestic violence prosecutor for the city of Everett for about 7.5 years. Prosecuting domestic violence requires a different mindset than prosecuting other areas of criminal law. Seeking justice in these cases include weighing both the victim safety and offender accountability and rehabilitation. And to be candid, these cases are often very tough to deal with. And we're often dealing with some of people's worst moments in their life. But I have found the work to be extremely important and worth dedicating most of my prosecution career handling. And much of the progress has been made to support domestic violence victims and survivors, to hold abusers accountable, and to create the updated legislation to further these goals. But I want to thank each and every one of you for the recognition here. I am humbled with this today, and my role is just one small role. And I take great pride in the work that's been done and left to be done in the city of Bellevue. Thank you again for the recognition today.
Well, on behalf of the entire city council, thank you so much for your excellent work in our city. We really do value what you do.
Thank you, Mayor.
And City Manager, I think there's another one.
Sure, Mayor and council members. The next topic under the manager's report is another good news story about a prestigious award the city recently received from the City County Communications and Marketing Association. With that, I'm just going to go ahead and turn it over to Brad Harwood, the city's Chief Communications Officer, just to tell you about the award. Brad?
Well, thank you, City Manager Miyake, Mayor Robinson, Deputy Mayor Newenhouse, and council members. I'm here today to share with you some excellent news. As Mr. Miyake pointed out, in September, the City of Bellevue won a Savvy Award for its special COVID-19 pandemic issue of It's Your City. The issue, for your reference and the public's, can be found in the council agenda packet online. So the Savvy Awards are sponsored each year by the City County Communications and Marketing Association, better known as 3CMA. The organization is the nation's premier network of local government communicators. Savvies recognize outstanding local government achievements in communications, public sector marketing, and city government relationships. So this special fourth 2020 edition of It's Your City was developed at a time when residents were really struggling with the pandemic's shutdown, all the implications from that, and businesses were obviously reeling due to the economic uncertainty and impacts. City staff's goal was to provide the community with a useful resource and ways to navigate the crisis. If you scroll through the issue or turn through it if you have still have a printed copy, you'll find topics ranging from how to tap into human services to uplifting examples of neighbors helping neighbors. The printed newsletter was also aimed at residents who may not have access to digital channels like the city's webpage or Twitter feed. So copies were sent to every address in Bellevue. Translated editions in 5 other languages were also available, and this was a Bellevue first for It's Your City. I can't overstate it enough that this was truly a collaborative, multi-department effort. Neighborhood outreach contributed crucial articles, human services and economic development gathered useful information for us to share, and the diversity team led the charge and advised on translations. A few special recognitions worth noting. Ted Van Dyken in graphics actually just retired, and he was a central player in this and other newsletters and making them look professional and polished. Our It's Your City editor, Claude Ioso, makes this process look easy, even if it's a special edition. And then finally, the Deputy Communications Officer, Michelle DeGrand, who helped guide this newsletter, while actually I was away on family leave. So well done, team. Finally, on behalf of the communications team, I want to express our appreciation to the council and the city manager's office for your continued support of our work. And for the latest news and accurate information about the city and what's going on in the community, please visit bellevuelaw.gov. And with that, I'll turn it back to Mr. Miyake.
Oh, I just want to congratulate staff on this and thank you, Brad, for Harwood, for all the work that you do for us and everybody who worked on this. I remember this edition really well, and it's just amazing when I look back on it. The last thing that we said on one of the columns, that Bellevue is strong and resilient, and we'll get through this together. And indeed we have, and continue to do that. So thank you.
So Mayor and council members, that concludes my report for this evening. And I hope you enjoyed the good news stories this evening. Thank you, Mayor. Back to you.
Terrific. Thank you. Okay, on to the consent calendar. Is there a motion to approve the consent calendar?
I move to approve the consent calendar.
Second.
Okay.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, we have 2 study session items. I'm going to ask that we take a break between them. So Mr. Miyake, would you like to introduce the first one?
Yes, Mayor. The first topic this evening, Mayor and council members, is an update on the King County East Trail Framework Plan for Wilburton. Tonight's study session will provide council with a progress update, including community engagement activities that occurred during the summer and next steps for the Wilburton East Trail Framework Steering Committee. Joining us this evening are Assistant Director of Community Development, Emil King, along with Associate Planner Jay Gu, as well as Mike Ingram, our Senior Planner for the Transportation Department. With that, I'll turn it over to Emil.
Thank you for that introduction, City Manager Miyake. Good evening, Mayor Robinson, Deputy Mayor Newenhouse, and members of council. Staff are excited to be here tonight to provide an update to the King County-led East Rail Framework Plan for Wilburton. East Rail is a long-standing council priority with the community, council members and staff already enjoying segments in the northern part and southern part of our city already open. The Wilburton segment to be highlighted tonight will add to our mobility options, open space network, and be a major placemaking feature. East Rail also furthers a key theme in Council's 2020 Economic Development Plan. Fostering a strong economy relies on greater connectivity between people, businesses, and public spaces, and East Rail will add to Bellevue. Bellevue staff are in the midst of working with King County, Sound Transit, and the East Rail partners on the Wilburton segment. The framework plan will inform future investment and development in the 100-foot wide East Rail corridor, as well as the interface with adjacent properties and land uses. The term being used is trail-oriented development, and the opportunities we'll have in Wilburton are immense. I'd like to now turn things over to Jay Gu and Mike Ingram, two of our core staff who are working on this effort, to provide you a short presentation.
Thank you, Emil. Good evening, Mayor Robinson, members of the council. I do have some slides and I will now activate those. Are you able to see these or what?
Not yet.
Okay, let me. Can you see?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
If you can turn that into a slideshow, we'll be perfect.
There we go. I think we're now we're good. So tonight we'll provide an overview of this East Rail Framework Plan, kind of what we're trying to accomplish with it and why the county has prioritized this and why the city is collaborating with the county and with Sound Transit. We will share with you the kind of the high level results of public engagement that we've conducted for the last couple of months here in Bellevue. And then we'll describe the next steps for the way forward for this, this process. Before we get into the details of the plan, I'd like to just step back a moment and look at the context of the overall East Rail. It is a former rail corridor. It stretches for 42 miles from Renton in the south up to Snohomish County with a spur connection down to Redmond. And it is in the process of being converted into a trail, as Emil had already noted. So there are parts of it open already in Bellevue in the south, from Coal Creek to Renton, and in the north from the Sound Transit Maintenance Facility up into and through Kirkland. So what's left are some major pieces of investment needed in the middle part of Bellevue. The county is on track to initiate a couple of those major investments next year. With the rehabilitation of the Wilburton Trestle that spans Kelsey Creek and Southeast 8th Street, and a construction of an overcrossing, a bridge at Northeast 8th Street to carry the trail over that busy arterial and drop down by the Sound Transit Station at Wilburton. Some recent good news. 2 weeks ago, Amazon announced a contribution of $7.5 million to advance the rail corridor, including $5 million to round out the budget needed for the rehabilitation of the Wilburton Trestle, and another $2.5 million to construct an interim trail connection from the north end of the trestle to the Northeast 8th Street Bridge. So that had previously been an unfunded piece, an unfunded need, and now that that's on track to be addressed. And that builds on earlier contributions, commitments from Facebook, REI, and Kaiser Permanente. So in terms of the area that we're looking at in this particular East Rail Framework Plan initiative, we're focusing on the central Wilburton area. So this is the area from the north end of the trestle up to the north end of Lake Bellevue at Northeast 12th Street. This is the most urbanized area of the entire 42-mile East Rail corridor. So the county is giving this particular attention. And there are a number of opportunities here. We'll get into those in a minute, but fundamentally, the city has also recognized that this is an area where changes will be happening. And as you'll recall, several years ago, the council appointed a committee to look at options for the future development of this area. And that committee developed this vision for a higher density mixed use development pattern, meaning taller buildings with people living there, working there, and commercial activities as well. So there'll be a whole lot more people in this area. And the East Rail corridor runs right through the middle of the area. And the East Rail also connects, so it abuts a lot of the properties in this area, as well as connects to some major infrastructure. So the planned Grand Connection connects to the East Rail, as well as I mentioned earlier, the East Rail drops down and connects right at the Wilburton's East Link station as well. So it's a pretty significant component of kind of what can happen in the Wilburton area. So in terms of the opportunities we're looking at, we recognize that, oftentimes when you have a rail corridor, the typical pattern is that buildings turn their backs to the corridor. And we've all seen this. You're usually looking at the loading docks and the dumpsters. And just pulling out the tracks and installing a trail doesn't in and of itself typically necessarily change that pattern. So you may get a few additional connections into the corridor so people can access those, whatever's going on in those buildings. But it's in general, you don't necessarily get a change in how the development happens. So what we're looking at here is how can we set conditions so that as adjacent properties redevelop, people will naturally understand and want to embrace the opportunity to interface with the corridor. And so we want to set conditions so that becomes the logical choice, but also understand kind of what are the conditions that we want to have those connections happen. So how much engagement, what does that engagement look like? What kind of improvements do we want on the corridor and on the private property adjacent? So this is really the opportunity at a high level of what we're looking at. We're also looking at what can happen within that corridor itself. So the corridor is 100 feet wide in ownership of King County south of 6th Street and of Sound Transit north of 6th Street. So in that 100 feet width, we need about 30 feet for the trail improvements, roughly speaking. And so that leaves some additional 70 feet or so of opportunity area. And so the question becomes, well, what do we want to have in that public space? How do we get it? How is it maintained over time? And so that's what we're exploring through the public outreach that we've conducted, as well as then through this next phases of the process where we try to understand, well, what will those corridor owners accept in those spaces, and how can we set conditions so that we can achieve the goals that the community would like to see for this space. So at this point, I'll turn the conversation over to Jay Gu to further discuss the process moving forward.
Thanks, Mike. So in spring 2021, the Wilburton East Trail Framework Plan was initiated. City staff from community development, transportation, parks, and community services are collaborating with King County to articulate a vision for the Wilburton segment of East Trail. The key focuses of the framework plan include define distinctive character zones within the corridor through Wilburton, identify potential uses, improvements, and access points, how the trail and adjacent land uses support activities. So the key players in this collaboration efforts include the steering committee, who provides oversight and direction for the framework plan. It consists of senior staff from different entities. Emil King from Community Development and Michael Shiozaki from Parks and Community Services are participating on the city's behalf. The core team consists of mid-level city and county staff who coordinate the work, and also our wonderful consultants, Berger Partnership, who provides expertise in landscape, urban design, and architecture, and 3 Sectors Intelligence, who does outreach and facilitation. Next, please. So outreach and engagement was a major component of this framework plan. During the summer months, adjacent property owners broader community, and community groups and organizations were engaged by intensive public outreach, including a virtual walk for the public, which was also attended by Mayor Robinson and council members Lee, Stokes, and Zong. We also hosted an online survey on Engaging Bellevue and received over 230 responses from the community. Other methods include meeting with adjacent property owners, public meetings with neighborhood and community groups, boards, and commissions, including a Bellevue Diversity Advantage Network, Bellevue Network on Aging, Youth Link Board, East Side Easy Rider Collaborative, and Wilburton Neighborhood Association. Each message encouraged the public to learn and convey their opinions on what's important for the project team to consider in this framework plan. For meetings with the public, we focused on topics like what will make the East Trail welcoming and inclusive? How do we make the corridor more accessible for people of all ages and abilities? And what are the appealing features and amenities that are attractive to residents and visitors? For meetings with adjacent property owners, we try to identify adjacent property owners' interests and opportunities and consider them in the framework plan. Next, please. Build on the diverse feedback received from the public and stakeholders, the project team identified some of the common themes for Wilburton East Trail segment. There was interest in ensuring that the corridor is accessible for people of all ages and abilities. User safety should be prioritized to make sure that both pedestrians and cyclists feel safe when sharing the corridor. There was significant support for placemaking, including informal gathering spaces with seating opportunities, more amenities and activity, more amenities and activities, as well as more public arts and performance spaces. The feedback also revealed great interest in exploring opportunities for more trees and vegetations as a benefit for the environment, as well as provide shades to the trail users. Next, please. Our next steps will focus on compiling inputs from the public and continue to collect additional community input. The Wilburton East Trail Steering Committee will meet for the second time on October the 19th to review opportunities for the Wilburton segment and consider each agency partner's potential role in realizing the vision for its future. The steering committee is planning to convene again in December and early 2022 to complete their work. Outcomes from this Wilburton East Trail Framework Plan will inform the development of comprehensive plan policy and code amendment to implement the upcoming Wilburton Vision implementation. And this wraps up the presentation. We thank you for the opportunity to brief you this evening and welcome your questions and comments.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So this is just information only, but is there anybody who would like to make a comment or have a question? I see Councilmember Robertson and Stokes. Go ahead. Councilmember Robertson, followed by Stokes and then Barksdale.
Thanks. No, I appreciate getting the update. This is really exciting. Looking at our 2016 interest statement, it's interesting how it's still so completely relevant. And it reminded me of when we wrote it. So a couple of questions and or comments. One is, what are we doing as a member of the steering committee to try to ensure grade separation at 4th and 6th eventually when we have the Grand Connection come in there? If the road crosses, I don't know if the road's actually going to cross there, but what are we doing on that? I guess that's just a first question, and then I have a comment.
Thank you, Councilmember Robertson. I'll go ahead and let Mike Ingram, as our subject matter expert and participant on the core team, address that question.
Yes, we are preserving the opportunity for a grade separation at 4th. It will have significant implications for how adjacent properties can interface and users can access the corridor. So there's some significant trade-offs there. And the additional consideration, of course, for the city is that any improvements at Northeast 4th Street would be the city's responsibility as we introduce that crossing. And I would anticipate something similar would be the case at 6th. Although there's to the extent that there's a crossing at 6th, the vision has always been that it would be at grade.
I didn't know if there's a light that can turn, if there's a traffic light that can
It would be,
change so people can cross safely. I
yes.
just don't want to see people, especially Northeast Fourth, which it's not as busy on that side, but it is the second busiest arterial in Bellevue. And I don't want to see people get hit by cars. So I'm always concerned about that. So secondly, I'm wondering what King County's record is or future looking idea with regard to activating the rail corridor through the Wilburton, because they may not have the budget to build all the amenities out to the 100-foot. If they're willing to allow some of the businesses to, it's called an encroachment permit, to maybe put cafes, not putting permanent things because it may need to come up someday, but allowing them to activate it and create those amenities by private investment, that I think would be really good if they have some sort of screening mechanism to decide, what should be allowed, whether it's a sidewalk cafe, whether it's, area where people can perform, in that area. So can you address that, please?
Yeah, spot on. That's exactly the sort of thing that this process is intended to flesh out, is what sorts of activities would the owners, King County and Sound Transit, be amenable to, and under what sort of things are they looking for, so that there can be some framework and guidance for the adjacent property owners or anybody else who wants to proposes to undertake some kind of improvement within the corridor. The county can already understand up front what is likely to be accepted, and the owners will have that framework to point to and understand what they were looking for. So that's what we're trying to do with this process.
Yeah, I think we should definitely encourage that. I mean, obviously the county is going to want insurance and indemnification, but if we can allow people to put art there, if we can allow them to activate it like that, I think that would be a real benefit to the people of Bellevue and the people using the trail. So thanks.
Councilmember Stokes, followed by Councilmember Barksdale.
Thank you very much. It's exciting to see this. As you know, I've been on the East Rail King County committee, but larger in King County, actually. We have Snohomish County as well since 2017. And when we really I was really glad going back and excited looking at all the policies, all the interests we had at the beginning at that time, that we really are doing those. And I appreciate Councilman Robertson's noting that. Actually, on 4th Street, there are traffic lights there. If you haven't been by there, you come up and people stop right there and people go across. It's a first step in this. And on what was the other street? Is it 1st Street, Michael? We just had a little kind of a ceremony there with Congressman Adam Smith, who is helping us get some federal funding, because apparently, it's the one that comes up and goes around to the park, to the botanical gardens and all that area, and the school. What is it? A federal road or something? It's kind of odd.
It is an arterial roadway, and it does require a significant, fairly costly installation of a signal at that point because of the curves and the volume of traffic. So the county asked Congressman Smith to be put on the list for federal funding. The good news story, the federal funding is looking a little less likely, but the good news story is the Amazon commitment will actually allow us to construct that improvement. Yeah, along with the connecting trail to the north and south.
Right. Well, and this is an exciting addition to this, and getting the partnership together and expanding that, and it's what we had dreamed about in terms of getting the businesses and community involved in this whole process. And it's as much as we thought about, and probably more. And it was really exciting to be just at the end of this segment we're talking about, but at the trestle. To celebrate that, because back in 2017, we were talking about, the trestle and how to preserve it and everything else. And we've had some money into it. And, but we, it's been almost 6 years now since then. And it looks like it's coming that way also. So it's really great. but and you also mentioned something, Congressman, Councilmember Robertson, about activating, and that's the whole idea of this, to activate that corridor. And when you go down and look at it, it's just amazing, and all the way through that, and the connectivity to other pieces. And the other thing is great about it is a true regional operation. Kirkland, Redmond, and Renton with their part, and that's all going on, and Bellevue and King County have been just great partners, and then with the individuals. So it's a great story for us, and it's a real great piece. So good to see this, and glad we're moving along this way. And thanks, the staff has just been fantastic. Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Barksdale, followed by Councilmember Zahn.
All right, thank you, Mayor. My comments are short. I appreciate the comments that have already been made about activating the space. My comments were going to be in line, are aligned with that. Specifically, curious about, because I know we had that tactical urbanism event previously, and if it could be a space similar to what Councilmember Robertson was saying, but that would allow for tactical urbanism, more of that just throughout, and maybe even, it might be difficult because it's next to Metro, but trying to get more festival streets, so it's easier for even nonprofits, community-based organizations to use those spaces as well. So I don't know if that's something that's being discussed.
We're definitely looking at all the range of possibilities, and we're hearing this from the public as well. It's been really helpful to hear all the excitement actually and the great ideas from the public.
Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Zahn, followed by Councilmember Lee.
Yeah, thank you. I'm excited about activating the space as well. A couple of things I was thinking about, which may not be exactly the same, but I always think about how the neighborhood access into the East Rail happens. And so to the degree that as we think about the 100-foot, that we're thinking about how we actually get our neighborhoods to access the space. And then I was thinking about, we had an event up in Redmond at the Google campus where, you know, there's some additional seating areas and space where that might land related to the Wilburton area. And then as I was thinking about placemaking, it may be in there already, but I was thinking about learning pods, right? Kind of heritage displays, those kinds of things, because I think that may be some things that we don't have as much of. So to the degree that we can introduce that, edible gardens might be, I think there was something about the vegetable piece, but the idea that there's an abundance along the trail, exercise stations that for seniors to be able to have, to be able to enjoy. And then I actually wonder if this could be a space where we start thinking about things like an East Side Pride Walk, a triathlon along that trail that maybe we can, you know, I think it does come down to the south end with some places that are close to the water to be able to just create some special types of events for the East Side, because it is so regional and it's 42 miles, how we might think about that visioning for the future as we complete the corridor. So just super excited about the opportunities. So that's on the usage side. I guess my question on the steering committee would be, sometimes it can be hard to hear from the voices of the hard to reach. So I am wondering about how the steering committee is capturing those voices that we may not be hearing from, especially as I think about, you know, we're going to be building out the Wilburton area. And so that's going to be another kind of urban neighborhood. So how do we imagine and think about the people that aren't here yet necessarily, and what kind of feedback they might have about what they would want to see?
Yeah, from the engagement standpoint, we totally agree that the outreach and thinking about who's going to be living in these new neighborhoods is of utmost importance. We allocated some city money to actually make sure that the engagement was done in a robust manner. We're actually supplementing with other city staff resources to help flesh that out. So as the steering committee moves along, we're between our first and second meeting right now of 4. We are relying upon the core team and our outreach consultant to kind of deliver us what we can learn from people who are here now, both residents and business community, and then think through how other places have kind of planned for those who aren't here yet. So totally agree with the importance of learning from others, as well as planning new neighborhoods in our city where not many people might actually live adjacent to it right now.
Great, thank you very much.
Councilmember Lee, followed by the Deputy Mayor, if you'd like.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I was looking at the lengths of the trail that goes through Bellevue, the urban center. And I think the impact is could be significant. And, it touches on a lot of things. And so what we do with it, can be almost unlimited. And I think that a number of things depends on, how well do we execute. And I think the potential is there. A number of things I was thinking about, which wasn't mentioned. A lot of things being discussed, so I don't need to go through them all. I think this represents history and heritage, of Bellevue, with the trusts going all the way through the nature, and then going to Mercer Slough, going to the downtown Bellevue, and all the way through and going to north. So I think you should reflect some of the stuff. It really tells a good, wonderful story. And obviously, it would show what happens present, otherwise we're not going to be doing this. And then furthermore, what can it do in the future? Like the question Councilman Roberts was asking, we do a lot of things with it. There's a lot of opportunities. So like safety and like the interaction, connection between a lot of stuff, between present and future. So I would say that it actually represents opportunity for technology as well. So really, this is something that I can connect and link and affect lots of Bellevue. So I think that's potential is there. Can do a lot of great things. So keep those things in mind and include the community, obviously, because whatever you represent present and the future, that means the people that are going to be involved and engaged with us and in the future. So do not miss them. Keep them involved. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll echo the comments of my colleagues there. Great presentation, very exciting. Love the way that we're looking at the placemaking and the accessibility, the seating and the public art or performance space. What's there not to like? I really want to appreciate and call out the amount of outreach it sounds like you've been doing during this entire process, and great to see that my neighborhood of Lake Hills was quite prominent, it looks like there, and some of the discussion and feedback, so I appreciate that. And not something that needs to be necessarily addressed today, but unless you have any comments on it, but just in terms of and I know that safety was one of the issues that came up here. So, when you're going through some of these activated spaces, just in terms of separating pedestrians from the cyclists who might not be stopping yet. They might come back for a coffee after their bike ride is over, but they might be just going through. But you've got cyclists, you've got pedestrians, you've got places to sit. I'm sure the people will be out with their dogs, etc. Would love to hear about that at a future date in terms of how we're going to handle that safety aspect of it. But so incredibly excited about this project.
I can just chime in and say that has been a recurring theme, the need to provide for some separate accommodation of people moving quickly through on bicycles and those that are moving at a slower speed on foot. We've heard that's been a pretty common theme throughout. And then the county's had some internal conversations among their organization, and they're also in the same place. So I think we can pretty much count on that part of it, being part of the design features.
Fantastic. Thanks, Michael.
And then I have one last question. Can you talk about the last mile with Sound Transit and how this is going to address that a little bit?
So I think you're referring to the segment that the Sound Transit owns from Northeast 6th Street up to SR 520. Am I correct? That in terms
well,
of
I mean, I think that in Wilburton as well as in even East Maine, I think, you know, it's within the last mile of connection to these stations. And so I just wondering, you know, are you thinking about that when you're doing these plans?
Okay, yes, now I have better understanding. So yes, in terms of access to their stations, the Sound Transit stations, we, the East Rail will be, of course, will connect people directly to the station at Wilburton, behind the Whole Foods. But we're also looking at how the East Rail can connect people to the urban center in the downtown and to the Spring District. And so, you know, coming from the south, there is an access opportunity at the Main Street alignment, which we have done a little bit of exploration of so far, and we will be doing more in the coming years. It is costly because of grades and conditions, but we want to, our goal is to have a high quality connection at Main Street from the East Rail across the freeway. We're getting a new bridge there, over to the East Main Station and into the lower part of downtown, because we're working on improved bicycle facilities on Main Street from 112th up to 108th. So that is work that's in progress, in different pieces of it at different stages. And then the other key connection is up at Spring Boulevard, where we're working on a ramp connection from the East Rail up to Spring Boulevard. And of course, Spring Boulevard includes our major east-west bicycle path between the Spring District and downtown. So folks getting into the north end of downtown can be served by that forthcoming connection as well. Terrific. So I think that starts to answer your question, I hope.
No, that's great. Okay. Sounds really good. Thank you. All right, great presentation. It is 7:13. Let's get back at 7:30. Would you please introduce the next study session item?
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. Your next study session topic is the Land Use Code Amendment for the East Main Station area. And just by way of background, tonight is the 5th in a series of study sessions for Council to consider the Land Use Code Amendment. This topic was last in front of Council on September 13th. And tonight, staff seek your feedback and, if ready, your direction on the floor area ratio, also known as FAR, the amenity incentive options, and the development agreement. Joining us this evening are Mike Brennan, Trisna Tanis, as well as Nick Whipple, all from the Development Services Department, as well as Matt Cummins and Emil King from the Community Development Department. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Mike to kick this off.
Thank you, Mr. Miyake, and good evening, Mayor Robinson, Deputy Mayor Newenhouse, and members of the council. As Mr. Miyake mentioned, we are here to continue with the council and your deliberation on the East Main Land Use Code Amendment. Next slide, please. Tonight, we are going to be providing some information, additional background information on some of the key elements of the code, specifically the base and maximum floor area ratio, or FAR, the public amenities and incentive options, and then the development agreement options for certain elements of the code for flexibility and public benefit when future development proposals are submitted. Next slide, please. So the agenda, just kind of high overview of the topics for this evening. I want to walk through quickly the timeline, kind of where we've been, where we are, and the plan forward to complete this work. The framework and the needs that are being addressed by this rezone or this upzone, the process for review of the final land use code amendment topics, and then essentially the meat of tonight's presentation is really walking through these particular topic areas, FAR, amenities, and the development agreement. Next slide, please. So the timeline, as Mr. Miyake mentioned, the last study session was on September 13th. And prior to that, we did hold the public hearing. The council had the public hearing in July. Reminding the council that following the public hearing, when the council is comfortable with the content of the code, you can move forward with adoption at any time. There are certain elements that we are still going to be working through with the council that are in the code. Tonight, we, as I mentioned, the FER and amenities and the DA And then we've got study sessions scheduled in November to deal with some of the other topic areas. But we will, as we move into November, need to reach some decision points with the council to achieve the end of year adoption that is shown in this particular timeline. If the council needs additional information or additional time, it could push this timeline out, but we are trying to advance this as quickly as possible, and any additional information that the council may need, staff is committed to developing that and advancing that back to your discussion as quickly as we possibly can accomplish that. Next slide, please. So the code adoption actually helps to address some specific city needs. And the council's been very clear about these in your policy adoption and in the discussions about the East Maine area. First of all, you are encouraging near-term redevelopment. So want to make sure that the code is calibrated in a way where there is incentive for the property owners, in this case, primarily the WIG properties, to move forward with development in the near term. You want to leverage that development area to realize the East Maine vision, which is really transformational for this part of the city, creating a walkable, vibrant community that really takes advantage of the light rail station that is right across the street, and that significant investment of public dollars. You also want to increase the supply of affordable housing in this particular area and use some of the value in this upzone that occurs to capture that goal for the city. And then lastly, the incentive amenities that contribute to the public good. Again, when you upzone property, it does add significant value to the property. Want to incentivize that redevelopment, making sure it's calibrated correctly, but also capture some of that value to create public amenities like open space, streets that are high quality, and another example is mentioned is affordable housing and say childcare, for example. Next slide, please. So I'm going to hand it to Ms. Tanis, who walked through a little bit more specifically some of the upcoming topic areas and then some of the decision points that we are looking forward to as part of this schedule. Trisna.
Thank you, Mike. Good evening, Mayor Robinson, Deputy Mayor Neuenhuis, council members. As we've talked about before, we have looked at council to direct what topics council wants to review. This slide shows the list of topics that Mike went through just a little bit ago. And these are the ones that have been identified for further discussion. In attachment B of your packet, this list of topics that's outlined, it is outlined in more detail in that attachment. And as council moves through these topics in study sessions, including most recently in the last study session on September 13th, staff has and will continue to update this table to document council's feedback and direction. Staff understands council wants to move this LUCA forward as efficiently and quickly as possible. So we have laid out council's review to achieve this desired efficiency. At the same time, we recognize that many of these topics are interrelated and that new or modified requests from our stakeholders may come in, and council may want to review these requests. So staff has adjusted the sequencing from what we had shown you last time to provide a bit more flexibility in council's review while still maintaining council's ability to give direction and make decisions as we move along in this process. As you know, the topics of building height and housing were covered at the last study session, where council did provide clear feedback and staff is tracking that feedback. Tonight, council is reviewing base and maximum density, or FAR, amenity options, and the use of development agreements, or DA, to modify certain standards or requirements. At the next study session on November 1st, staff will present information and analysis on floor plate and miscellaneous topics such as pedestrian and bike path, fee in lieu for affordable housing, and exceptions to non-conforming provisions and expansions of the Bellevue Athletic Club. We anticipate being able to present to council a finalized attachment B on November 15th, so that we can confirm previous feedback and direction in each of the topics. This will also allow council to consider the entire list of adjustments to the draft LUCA for inclusion into the final ordinance, and council can potentially take action in December. There are several factors to keep in mind that affect this possible adoption date. These are new requests, modification to requests, or new topics will likely add process and time. Any additional environmental review or in-depth analysis will also add process and time. And lastly, we are looking for council to provide direction on that November 15th date to finalize the LUCA ordinance. Staff will, of course, do our best to be as efficient as possible to advance this LUCA forward and respond to any additional analysis or request for information from council. So as noted earlier tonight, we are focused on the topics of FAR, amenity incentive options, and development agreement items. As you heard earlier from Mike, this area is receiving a large upzone, and we are also wanting to take advantage of the city invested light rail that's coming through the area. This slide summarizes the options available to council. Options A and B are packaged options for council's consideration. Option A is what is in the current draft LUCA. Option B is what staff is recommending at this point in time. This includes provisions that address stakeholder WIG properties requests for additional amenity options and having a development agreement path to vary from standards for maximum height, FAR, special amenity, and non-conforming requirements. The last row in this slide shows WIG properties requests for these topics. We will go through in a lot more detail both option A and B, as well as what the stakeholders have requested. So in later slides that's coming up here. Before we get into those options, however, as part of council's deliberation on the topics of base and maximum FAR and the amenity incentive program that's included here, we want to provide a quick recap on incentive zoning. Incentive zoning is a land use tool that the city has used successfully since 1981. This program is in place in downtown and Bellevue. It is a voluntary program where the developer can choose to take advantage of taller heights and additional FAR in exchange for providing public benefits. This program provides for an additional lift between what the developer can build as of right, which is the base FAR, to what the developer can build through the incentive program or maximum FAR. As you know, the city retained Eco Northwest to perform an economic analysis to inform and calibrate where the base FAR should be set in relation to the maximum FAR. This economic analysis was completed at the end of last year, and we've set the base FAR based on the Eco Northwest economic analysis so that the developer is encouraged to develop to the maximum FAR and in the near term, which in turn will result in public benefits. It is in the city's interest to see development take place, and development does bring economic good in terms of jobs, services, and revenue for the city. And with the incentive program, affordable housing, open space, childcare services, potential streets, and other public benefits would be generated and created for the city. So before we go into the various options, just to set what is available in terms of existing zoning for the area, the East Maine area is designated Office Limited Business, or OLB. This should not be confused with downtown OLB South or OLB Central. In this OLB land use district, a developer may only go to a maximum FAR of 0.5 for office and approximately 1.0 for residential. There is not an amenity incentive program for this area. So again, that 0.5 for office and 1.0 for residential are the maximums density. For non-residential or office, we are talking about an upzone of 5 times to base FAR 2.5. and 10 times with the current, from current zoning to the maximum FAR. Lastly, there is no development agreement option at all in the OP district. So that is kind of the current regulations that are in effect for this area. So I'm now going to turn over the presentation to Nick Whipple, who will go through in more detail the options for these topics. Nick?
Thank you, Trisna, and good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and City Council. As Trisna mentioned in the earlier slide, there are two options that we have brought for council consideration this evening, and both options, as mentioned, will significantly upzone the area as compared to the current OLB zoning. So option A, the first option here is the current draft land use code that's before council. So this option was developed in December of 2020. The use of the development agreement option, for example, is not included in this option because at that time council hadn't directed such use of a development agreement. This option does call for increasing the as of right FAR or the base FAR to 0.5 for non-residential, or sorry, from 0.5 to 2.5 for non-residential. So increasing that base FAR by 5 times, and then from 1 FAR to 3.5 for residential use. The maximum FAR is 5, which is consistent with the previous environmental analysis and with what was studied under the economic analysis. And then, as mentioned earlier, there's no development agreement option with the current draft since it wasn't directed at that time. Options A and B and the stakeholder request include the use of incentive zoning as a model for achieving public benefits within the East Maine TOD. So the light blue color, or we'll go back to the previous slide for a second. The light blue color above the different base FARs is showing where the voluntary incentive zoning program will be used. So the comprehensive plan policies do call for the establishment of an incentive zoning system that offers additional floor area in exchange for affordable housing as a top priority and other amenities that contribute to the public good. And we'll go into those amenities in the next slide. But first, when deciding whether to use incentive zoning as a model, we had to evaluate the soundness of the property market to determine if there is enough demand for an effective implementation of an incentive zoning program. So a well-functioning incentive zoning program has to support building a larger building while also delivering public benefits. And the strength of the program really lies in the results of the economic analysis, which was completed about 9 months ago by the city's consultant, as mentioned earlier, Eco Northwest. And that report did indicate that setting the base FAR at 2.5 for non-residential, which again is 5 times higher than the current zoning allowance, and 3.5 for residential, which is 3.5 times higher than the current zoning allowance, would fulfill the council's desire for near-term redevelopment and a base FAR that is sufficiently high to support a vibrant, livable, and memorable TOD. The report also indicates that any base FAR above a 2.5 for non-residential use and 3.5 for residential use may rule out large-scale use of an incentive system, which would then not deliver the public benefits sought by council. Next slide, please. So for a developer to exceed the base floor area ratio, and access that additional development capacity up to the 5 FAR, the developer would need to provide certain public benefits. So the public benefits as structured in the land use code are tiered to focus on council priorities expressed through the comprehensive plan and through prior council meetings. So the first tier is equal to 75% of the project's amenities, and then the second tier would be the remaining 25% of a project's amenity points. So for residential development, the incentive program does prioritize affordable housing as that top tier amenity. And then any item from the remaining list can make up that 25% of the needed amenity points. And then for non-residential use, the first tier amenities are potential streets, which as a reminder for council, those are the circulation on the site. So to create some of the smaller blocks within the TOD, potential streets are needed. So those are either pedestrian and bicycle connections. Those could also be vehicular connections through the site to frame the blocks. And then also open space is a first tier amenity for non-residential development and childcare as well. So Everything above the blue line is considered a first tier amenity. The other amenities on the list are also very important, and they do help to support the vision for East Maine and reinforce the station area's character and location. So for example, you'll notice stream and wetland is on this list. The improvements to stream and wetlands was included on the list for East Maine because of the location of Sturdivant Creek, as well as the TOD's closeness to Mercer Slough and other wetlands within the area. Next slide, please. So option B, so this is an updated recommendation from staff with a list now of different DA development agreement options. So the recommendation for the base floor area ratio and the maximum floor area ratio do remain the same as option A, which is again consistent with the economic analysis as well as the prior SEPA analysis. During the public hearing, we did hear from council an interest in using a development agreement tool to allow consideration for increased building heights as well as floor area ratio. The council was also interested in ensuring minimal disruption to the Bellevue Athletic Club's ongoing operations. So this recommendation includes a development agreement option to evaluate non-conforming exceptions. And then we also are expanding the list of amenity options available in East Maine. So you'll see special amenities on the list for the development agreement option. Some council members may recall what was developed in the downtown livability, which was the special amenity. So the DA does allow a path for this flexible amenity option that isn't contemplated yet under the code. So it would just be something really unique and special to East Maine that would be considered through that DA option. Next slide, please. So this slide shows the recommended changes in red. So we've added some amenities to the list. The blue line kind of remains in the same spot. So the amenity prioritization scheme is very similar or is the same as option A. So 75% of residential development provides amenities through affordable housing, and then 75% for non-residential is earned through potential streets, open space, and childcare. We've added 3 amenity choices from the downtown code to the East Maine code. So those include the pedestrian bridge, the special amenity, and then performing arts as well. Since these amenities were used in the downtown code or they're existing in the downtown code, we can easily fold them into the East Maine code. We have information on the cost of these amenities, and we can ensure that there's proper calibration for awarding additional floor area in exchange for these options. So amenities that are not within the land use code do require additional analysis to develop that incentive and then to price the incentive and to properly calibrate it. So that does result in a potential time delay if additional amenities were added that aren't in the existing code. Next slide, please. So now just to walk us through this stakeholder request. So WIG Properties has advocated for increasing the base floor area ratio to 3.5 for non-residential, and then increasing the maximum floor area ratio to 5.3, as well as using development agreements for Catalyst project, which is a provision that we do have in the Bell Red Code, open space, special amenity, and any and all code requirements just to ensure absolute flexibility for a future project. So staff does not support increasing the base FAR to 3.5 for non-residential use. So the current draft does provide, and option B provides for a base FAR that's 5 times greater than the current zoning allowance. So the base FAR was derived from careful analysis by the city's consultants to balance the need for the base FAR to be set in a way that did not result in a down zone of the property, that it would deliver a vibrant placemaking development in the near term, and lastly, ensure that there was effective use of the incentive system to deliver public benefits. So increasing the base FAR will reduce the amount of value that the city is able to capture for public benefits, and it may limit use of the incentive program. Staff also does not support the request to increase the maximum FAR to 5.3. So very similar to the height request from the September 13th council discussion, where the request is beyond what was studied under SEPA. So it would require additional time to review if that was considered. And then lastly, for the list of items to scope under the development agreement. So staff, we do support the use of the development agreement from departing from very specific requirements, such as height, floor area ratio, the special amenity as reflected in the recommended option B. But staff does not support providing an option to negotiate different provisions as needed through a development agreement. It's more important that the recommendation identify very specific provisions in the code to narrow those deal points in the future contract negotiation. So this framework of narrowing down the items that can be varied does allow for better administration of the DA tool. It also results in predictability, not only for the future developer, but also the public in the city during that review process. Next slide, please. So lastly, just to wrap up the staff presentation, the stakeholders, they do request an expanded list of amenities. So this list of 11 options is consistent with the staff recommended option B. So we've included all the same amenity options. Where the request varies from the staff recommendation is the first tier amenities for non-residential development. So the request is to include enhanced streetscape. Just as information for the council and the public, enhanced streetscape is an amenity option it's available in the remaining tier under the staff recommendation. The amenity essentially, it provides additional space between the back of curb and the building. Essentially, it's a wider sidewalk with more landscaping. It supports movable tables and chairs with additional landscaping, a really effective way to activate a building frontage. We are finding that developers choose to include these types of amenities in their projects. And they'd receive increased floor area in the downtown code, and then they would also receive increased floor area in the East Maine code as drafted for including those types of amenities. So we didn't feel that the land use code would need to prioritize this amenity within the first tier, as it's something that we do see. And the inclusion of enhanced streetscape as a first tier option does have the potential to decrease generation of other prioritized public amenities. So childcare service uses, open space, and some of the potential street connectivity that's sought with that amenity option. So the inclusion of the enhanced streetscape for those reasons is not recommended by staff. And next slide, please. So now I'll turn it back to Mike to conclude our staff presentation.
Thanks, Nick. So again, this is really another presentation dealing with some of the major or the key elements of the code that really have the economic balance incorporated here. So it's about the calibration, as was mentioned in the presentation. There was a significant amount of work done to actually arrive at the recommendation. We've incorporated the council feedback so far on these particular areas. And certainly if the council wishes additional changes, we're happy to provide additional information to support that or amend the code as necessary. So with that, Mayor, that completes our presentation. We are prepared to answer questions, take any feedback that the council wishes to provide tonight.
Thank you, Mike. Can we end up on the slide with the 3 options just for reference? Thank you. So just to clarify, the land use codes that we come up with are going to be for all the properties in East Maine, but a development agreement can be site specific or development specific. And we are looking for information on FAR, base and maximum. We're looking for information on the development agreement provisions like maximum height, FAR, non-conforming exceptions and special amenities. And then we're looking for input on amenity options for residential and non-residential, first tier, and an expanded list. So when you are asking questions and giving feedback for staff, if you can include some of those items in your feedback, I think it'd be really helpful for staff because we're looking for that information tonight. So I'm going to let everybody have 1 or 2 or 3 chances to talk. I ask that you limit your comments to 3 minutes because just for meeting management purposes, it's hard to take in more than 3 minutes worth of information from anybody at a time. But I'll go back around as much as we need to. So we're going to start with the Deputy Mayor, followed by Councilmember Zahn, Robertson, Stokes, Lee, Barksdale, and myself. So Deputy Mayor, would you like to start us off?
Oh, great. Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate it. And thank you, Mike, Trisna, Nick, great presentation. Thanks you for getting us this far on this journey. Let's make sure we stick to the December 6th deadline. Boy, lots of questions, but I'll maintain the 3-minute time limit here. So first on the amenities, I really appreciate that we added to those. And it's a much stronger, more robust list, I think, from that the stakeholders can certainly pick from. The one question though regarding, and I believe the stakeholders may have brought this up, why not shift the pedestrian bridge and the enhanced streetscapes to the tier 1? Because and especially the pedestrian bridge, which I see as really critical for this space, given the TOD area and getting people over to that property from the actual light rail station. So why isn't that part of tier 1?
So I'll take an initial shot at this question, and then Nick or Tristan, if you have additional thoughts. So the tier 1 options were really those options that the council identified as your kind of your targets, your priorities. So it was about affordable housing, creating open space that provides a place for people to go, respite, recreate, and childcare. So if you move additional items up into the tier 1, the possibility of capturing some of those priorities that have been previously identified goes down. So you might take the pedestrian bridge option in lieu of doing childcare or providing additional open space, for example. But again, these are council choices as far as how you want to prioritize these amenities within the code and what outcomes you think are the most important as redevelopment happens in East Maine.
Got it. Thanks, Mike. I always appreciate your expertise in this area, and I always want to see why that decision or why that recommendation from staff was made. So I appreciate that explanation. Second question here, in regards to the max FAR. So I think both staff and the stakeholders, I think, are agree that it's a 5 max FAR. But I think there's a disagreement in terms of when you start including that max FAR. Either it's after the reduction due to the critical areas or before. And it would seem to me only fair to have it after the critical areas versus before. But I would love to hear your I guess explanation on that one.
So the way to stay consistent with the way the code is administered elsewhere in the city, critical areas are not included when you're calculating the maximum floor area ratio. So
throughout the city?
Yeah, that's, and correct me if I'm wrong, somebody on the more technical expertise here, but so in this particular instance, there is some critical area within this development area, within the East Maine area. So we apply the 5.0 max FAR across all of the property that's not included as a critical area. So in the case where you want to adjust the FAR, we wouldn't want to apply it to the critical area. We just want to make an adjustment to the max FAR for the developable property. And in this case, the concern is that the 5.0 that's been established was what was studied as part of the SEPA review, and to go beyond that starts to raise concern about additional work that we would need to do. So the recommendation was, if we're going to do an additional FAR, to do it as part of a development agreement, and that analysis would happen with the actual proposal, the development proposal, and the DA as it goes through the process, if the council wanted to allow that small lift in FAR for additional public benefit, is what was signaled by by council at the last meeting.
Thank you, Mike, and I'll stop there. Thank you.
Okay, great. Councilmember Zahn.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Mike, Emil, and Trisna for continuing to work with us and the developers on this land use code. You know, when I think about the DA, what we do here consistently is that predictability is important both for the developers and for the public. So I would be supportive of, especially since we've been working on this for 7 years, tailoring the DA for those provisions that you've already identified of increasing building height and FAR, non-conforming exceptions and special amenities. And then to the point about not diluting the tier 1 priorities that we want as a city, I do have a question about, you know, when I think about the pedestrian bridge, that's part of our Vision Zero and really trying to create more separation for pedestrians and vehicles. So I think that is a trade-off of whether we put that into the tier 1. And then the other one is I see sustainability certification as a second tier. Is it a second tier because we think that developers would do that anyway, and so we don't see that as being a tier 1? Because these buildings will be here for many, many years. And so to the degree that we are seeing sustainable design and construction and total cost of ownership, that would be helpful. So that's one question I have.
So, and Nick, on the question on sustainability and how that's applied elsewhere in the land use code and why it was selected as a tier 1, can you answer that question, please?
Yes, thank you, Councilmember Zahn, for the question. So it kind of goes back to Mike's earlier point too about really selecting kind of the list of priorities that council would like to see in those first tiers. So we have some properties within downtown, for example, that have taken advantage of that sustainability certificate just as a course of how they'd like to develop their projects. That's not I guess something that they couldn't choose to do still within East Maine, but it's just a matter of what are those most important priorities for East Maine in particular. And so at least how we've presented option B, that would include the affordable housing, open space, childcare, and potential street. The more you add to it, as you kind of mentioned, it sort of dilutes that tier 1. We do see that sustainability certificate getting used, but we did not feel that was a prior direction that we had received to include it as a top tier amenity for East Maine, but still an amenity that's available if they would like to do that within East Maine as a second tier.
Okay, so it is something that I'm concerned about just because of how long buildings last and whether without moving it to a first tier, it would be done anyway. So if there's some information about what other building and developers are doing and whether they're choosing the sustainability certificate, even if it doesn't land in a first tier, I'd like to understand a bit more about that. And then
Councilmember Zahn, let me stop you there and I'll get back to you, okay?
Yep.
Councilmember Robertson.
Okay, thank you. So I'm thinking about the purpose and the goals that we are doing this upzone for, and that is we want to see more housing, we want to see transit-oriented development, and we want to make sure that we can meet our growth goals, which are really bold. And so from my perspective, anything that doesn't allow the property developer to max that density max the density up to, whatever our top numbers are, is something that we need to figure out how to work around. So I have a lot of questions. I'll probably have to come around again. But first, on the critical area FAR issue, I thought critical area code didn't apply in downtown, or maybe possibly not in Belred. And I also thought that when the max FAR was studied, it was net, like full FAR, if you will, and didn't take into account the critical areas. So could someone please explain that to me?
Sure, Councilmember Robertson, I can jump in on the point about the critical areas. So in the downtown, you're correct, it does not, the critical areas ordinance does not apply to the downtown. There are no critical areas within the downtown. So that section wouldn't apply. Then for Bell Red, there are critical areas, as you all know, streams and wetlands throughout there. And so the critical areas ordinance does apply there. And there is a density intensity calculation that would apply to sites as they redevelop within the Bell Red corridor. That same density intensity calculation is what's being adapted for the East Maine area. So it would really apply to the Hilton Hotel property since they have Sturdivant Creek behind the hotel. And the impact on what that density is not really understandable at this point. In that we would have to actually quantify, what is the extent of critical areas on that property. So we do know, of course, the streams there, it's a type F stream. We don't know what the associated wetlands might be rated as, so we don't really know, how far that buffer extends. So I assume at least the stakeholder request for 5.3 is grounded in some sort of idea of this is probably what the offset is to make up for that critical areas, but again, the request would apply then to the entire East Maine TOD high block, which might put us way beyond what the offset is with having the critical areas on site.
Okay, I mean, I think that it would be helpful because the critical areas does apply here, and I know there are fish in that stream. I've seen them, so it would be good to figure out how to make sure that that works. Mayor, can I ask one more? Or do you want me to defer?
If you wouldn't mind, I'll come back to you.
Great. Yeah, I have a couple more. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Stokes. I can't hear you yet. There you go.
Now you can. Okay. Now, I really appreciate the work that's been done on this on both sides. Staff is, I think, really narrowing this down. And the first question I'd like to ask on this is, and I want to say I like the option B, and I like what the staff is recommending. I think and what the property owners want are things that can be worked out through that. So I'd like to see us get this done and get to and not bog down in A, B, C, D, which ones we're going to choose and all of that. I at this point it's been laid out pretty well, and I trust the staff as our advisors and working for us to really get us in the best position on this and go forward on it. But what I'd like to know is a specific question, again, between these options between the first tier and second tier. It sounds like if we have the 4 first tier pieces and then we want to add something from the second tier, that there's some trade-offs there. What's the, it seems to me that you work at it and maybe there's some that you would take from the first tier or second tier. And that should be something that I don't think we can make the decision because we'd be here all night and probably the next night going over all this stuff. But when you get the staff and the builders in place and their experts working with them, we ought to be able to take this. And I would want to look at this and what is the best mix for this property as we go through all of that. Is that the kind of the approach you're taking, or are you really rigid? It has to be first tier, and if you put in something from second tier, you have to take something from first tier out.
So let me try to respond to that question. So the code does differentiate how first tier and second tier are applied. So remembering that the first 75% of the FAR lift in the incentive system needs to come from the first tier for both the residential and the commercial. So residential would be affordable housing, would have to make up that first 75% of the FAR above the base. For commercial, it's open space, childcare, and a potential streets would have to make that up before you could go into the second tier and make up the other 25%. So again, it is structured to try to focus that public benefit on those things that the council views as the priority. And this is based on policy direction that you've provided in comments. If you want to move items out of the second tier into the first tier, you could choose to just add them, or you could choose to move a first tier one down into the second tier. It really is the council's option. I would recommend that we probably want to keep those top tier items in the top tier because those are, very specific community needs in this area that we're trying to address. But again, it is the council's choice on how you want to calibrate the tiering system and what items you want to put in the first versus the second tier.
Okay, that helps a lot because I think we've actually made a lot of these decisions over time period. And the four that are listed here are things we've talked about as a top priorities for a long time. So I'm comfortable with that. If we want to work on pedestrian bridge or performing arts, that would be something that we would take into account on the other 25%, right?
The way in option B, that's the way it is structured. Yes,
yeah,
that's correct.
Okay.
Okay, I'll come back to Councilmember Stokes.
Sure.
Let's go to Councilmember Lee.
Thanks, Mayor. Good job, staff, working hard with proposal and also with the developers. So we appreciate that. My question is that this is something that I think we want to see happen. This project, and the reason is that because we want to see public benefits. Ultimately, that's one and the same. If we don't get the project developed, we're not going to see any benefits. So let's look at how we can get the project done. I think that depends on the feasibility, economic feasibility, the developers can actually build it the way we want it, the way they see it. I think that's what we're talking about. Council sees the project, we say, hey, this is really good. And by doing it, it's not just for the city, for economic development, but also for our, community benefit, public benefit. So it's a good thing. And I see that, the question, this difference is in two. One is the amenities. The other one is FAR and heights. FAR, the only thing I see is the maximum FAR, instead of 5.3, we're talking about 5.0. So I'm not sure, how we can fix that. So I'd like to hear more about that. And the other one, of course, is the 3.5, which the staff agrees with the residential, and they want, I think, what is it, 2.5? The staff agrees to give 3.5. So I don't see there's that much of a big difference. Yeah, 3.5. Oh, non-residential staff only provides 2.5, they want 3.5. So there's something that we can talk about. And I appreciate the staff having economic feasibility looking at it. That's great. But now I find out that the developer also have economic analysis. So I like to see what are the differences. Maybe there's something that we can work out from that discussion. What are the assumptions? Are we on the same page? Are we not? What are the differences? Let's figure that out. Okay. And in terms of the amenity, I agree that I don't see that much a difference, especially first tier. What we want, it's mostly included. And I heard also council actually has option to move them. So I think we are in the driver's seat. We can make it work, make it not work, depending on how realistically the economic is going to come out through the development. If the developer does a lousy job, then they're not going to make it work. If they do a great job, we may get even more amenities, right? I mean, that's the whole idea of having that done. So the thing I heard is that the developer would like to have the DA to be a little more specific. And I think the staff says, no, I don't know whether that's the case. I like the staff confirm that. The staff said that we don't want it to be really too specific. We want to discuss it, negotiate it. That I think developer has some concerns because what if they don't get it? Then the whole project goes out the window and they're not going to do anything. They spend all the money at the time. So I like to get those 2 points clarified.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Lee. Go ahead, Mike.
So as far as the FAR request to go to the 5.3 that you see in the stakeholders request on the screen, the recommendation again was if the council wants to provide that option to do it as a development agreement with additional public benefit when a development proposal comes in. So that if the council is interested in that, we can certainly accommodate that within the code. It would require, as noted in the agenda materials, additional environmental review when the development agreement comes through, but that would happen again with that project proposal. So in the future. As far as the moving from 2.5 to 3.5 for the non-residential, I think during the presentation, I think Nick walked through how that was calibrated and making sure that it really is incentivizing near-term development, but still allowing room for those amenities that would be captured with the going to the maximum of the 5-point FAR. So again, if the council wants to consider that, that is, there's an economic impact to the model, so to speak, that we would need to come back and provide additional information to describe what the implications of that are. And then as far as the amenities system and et cetera, you said the council is in the driver's seat. You're absolutely in the driver's seat on all of this, getting to the final adoption. It really is the council's discretion on what you want to include in the code. So how you choose to array those amenities within the first tier and the second tier is certainly at the council's discretion.
Can I ask a quick question?
No. I'll come back to you.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Barksdale.
All right, thank you, Mayor. Quick questions. So one of the things that I'm hearing is this tension between what goes on the first tier and the second tier, almost as if there's sort of a false dichotomy. Is there an option, or has there been thinking around adding a third tier? Maybe like the first tier is like critical, like critically need whatever's in that first tier. Second tier is like things that are needed and they're consistent with the vision. And then the third tier is like nice to have, they fit within the community and help enhance the space. So that's one question. Second question, I'd like to add mom and pop shops. So tenant spaces for mom and pop shops. And then how do we come up with the 10,000 square foot for childcare? Is that the average size, or is a larger space needed to further incentivize childcare spaces? Thank you.
So Nick or Trisna, do you want to handle Councilmember Barksdale's questions? The third tier, I don't believe we've got a multi-tier system, but if we do, maybe we could describe that.
Sure. So, I mean, as Councilmember Barksdale, as you're noting, the approach is the first tier, second tier. That's really what was studied. There's kind of a finite amount of floor area that can be earned through the incentive program. So it would be important to try and focus that list as much as possible. And so even with the first tier, there are different options for the developer to choose. If they provide childcare, which is you're correct in noting the up to 10,000 square feet per project for bonus square footage. So that was really derived based off of our understanding of a typical daycare size or childcare size. But if a developer was to choose childcare use, open space, potential streets, all three of those amenities to kind of fill up their first tier before moving on to the second tier, that's certainly an option. We haven't looked at, though, trying to parse out certain items within the first tier, move them to another tier, a second tier, then items in the second tier, moving them to a third tier. We haven't done that level of analysis. If that's something the council would like, we can certainly come back with some information about that. And then with the question about the mom and pop shops or wanting to see additional amenities. So the list that's before council is a list of amenities that the city does have experience within Bellevue as well as downtown. And with that, there is some efficiencies in that we do understand, the cost to deliver that amenity. We also understand how to properly award floor area based on that cost. So getting the calibration right is going to be a little more straightforward with already developed amenity options. With East Maine in particular, there was some calibration that was done with affordable housing, for example, to make that one really work for this area. But if we were to add additional amenity options that weren't previously considered, that would take some time because we would have to actually study how we would design that amenity option. What are some of the parameters that we'd be looking at to really make that a successful option? And then also, how do we assign a value to that to be able to make sure it's attractive for a developer to choose, and it also provides, the floor area that would really make them, again, attractive as a choice. So that would require some additional follow-up if that's the direction. And was I missing any other questions, Councilmember Barksdale?
No, I think you hit all of them. I have a follow-up, but I'll wait until the next round. Thank you.
All right, thanks everybody. I'll be quick. I like the idea of the option B recommendations, and that the developer can bargain for more through a development agreement beyond the baseline. The two things that I'm interested in is when you look at potential streets in the first tier, I'm wondering why that was put in the first tier, and if we could morph that into something that was enhancing the streetscape with ped bike paths, if that would be equivalent to that, or if we could combine that. And then I'll ask my second question after you answer that.
So Mike, I can respond to Mayor Robinson's question. So with the potential streets, so there's policy direction to provide kind of smaller walkable blocks in creating kind of connections through for pedestrians, for cyclists, for vehicles through the site. So the potential street, we also brought to council July of 2020. We brought this new concept to you all, and you had asked that we kind of think more expansive on this concept, and we start to allow for not only vehicular streets, but if they wanted to do a ped bike connection instead, what would that look like? So this amenity option is really inclusive of that feedback. So it does allow for ped bike connections. It also allows for vehicular connections. The enhanced streetscape is an amenity option that's used in the downtown code, and it's really addressing the space between the backup curb and the building, and it's essentially a wider sidewalk. It does allow it, or the intent of that was to allow for some outdoor dining space, some increased landscaping along the building frontage. That's really what its intent was. We did feel that, at least with the potential street option, we were addressing that need to provide ped bike circulation within the TOD, which is why it raised up as a first tier amenity for this. But certainly council's decision, if we wanted to move enhanced streetscape around, that's something we could take feedback on.
I think I'd be interested in doing kind of an either the potential streets or an enhanced streetscape with ped bike. So whatever that would look like. And then the other thing is, we talk about residential affordable housing incentives. I would like staff to look at non-residential affordable housing incentives and what that might look like. And I know I don't expect an answer tonight, but I'd like that to be something that could come back to us. So let's go ahead back around, and we'll start with the Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. And I like your comment there with the non-residential affordable housing incentives there. Two quick questions, and then I get some recommendations. So one, OLB South, what is the base FAR for non-residential in OLB South?
The base FAR is 4.5, and the maximum is 5.
Okay. And then for downtown or OLB South, do they break out the amenity system in a tiered system like this as well? Or is it just one list of amenities?
So Deputy Mayor, the East Maine code is modeled somewhat after the downtown approach to do the 75% from a certain kind of bucket of amenities, and then the remaining from a larger list. And in the downtown, there are the main focus there is on really open space, public realm related amenities. So with that, there's a list that's inclusive of probably 8 or 9 items to be able to respond to that need in downtown for really public realm kind of enhancing amenity options. We did evaluate kind of the needs in East Maine, which is how we arrived at this list of first tier amenity options, but downtown has kind of a different set of priorities, but similar model.
So, okay, so there is a tiered approach then for downtown is what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Well, I given that information about OLB South, I think I'd be in favor of increasing the non-residential FAR to 3.5, so have it the same FAR as residential. I think it just makes sense for this, given the location. It's right beside OLB South. This is an area that's going to have to compete against OLB South or compete against downtown. So therefore, I'd be in favor, and I'm not sure how my colleagues feel about that, but I think having both 3.5 FAR makes a lot of sense. So I will stop there. It's probably my time. Thank you.
Councilmember Zahn.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So I would say that I agree with Councilmember Barksdale about the mom and pop shop, adding that as one of the amenities. I guess my other question is, does this area, does the MFTE apply? So when we look at the incentives, it would be,
yes,
the MFTE would also apply. Okay.
Yes, it would apply in this area.
And when we look at housing, does it include both rentals as well as home ownership when we think about the residential?
Yes, and at the next council meeting, we'll also be talking about what that means in terms of affordability levels. So that's set aside for a future conversation. But either option, rental or homeownership, is available in this area.
And do we ever provide any incentive or acknowledge or really encourage the homeownership piece? Because we do not have enough housing, especially the middle housing, to be able for people to be able to have home ownership, both to downsize as well as to move into. So just wondered if that can be included. And then my other comment would be on the affordable housing. Seems like when we've talked about that, they've always come back with no micro housing. So is that another area where, you know, this is such an area for TOD where smaller micro housing where people don't have to have a car, they can get to where they need to go. And so I'm wondering whether the way these incentives are set up, there would be this encouragement or incentivizing that type of housing as well.
I'm going to break in here for just a minute because there's a consistent thread to want to re-examine the incentives in many different ways. And so I'd like staff at the end of this to give us some feedback on how we might have that moment without slowing down our timeline. But Councilmember Zahn and everybody else, can you also comment on where you are at the recommended base FIR, option B or something other than that, please?
Well, I would say that I support the option B that staff has. And I also acknowledge that when I read the Eco Northwest report on page 8, it talks about the fact that market conditions are constantly changing and that we should be monitoring and revising the incentive zoning system when appropriate. So if there is a DA that allows us to work with the developer on the height and the FAR, that allows us to do that at that time. But right now, based on what we know, and I trust that the staff is evaluating the report from Eco Northwest, that we hired them in good faith to give us a economic analysis, and that is what resulted in what we're seeing here as option B. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, Councilmember Robertson.
Thanks. Okay, so picking up, so let me just go through where I am with this, Mayor, so that I can respond to your question. First, I would be interested in seeing the base FAR be set at 3.5 for both. I would like to see the max FAR set at 5, full 5 FAR for both, so that when there's on the Hilton site that they can get to 5, because we won't get the housing we need without getting to the full 5. With regard to the amenities, I'm comfortable with the list. The one thing I would elevate from second tier to first would be the ped bridge. I think that's a really important amenity, both for traffic safety as well as activating this site and connecting with the light rail system, which is a wonderful amenity for the whole city. The DA, I would the reason that we do DAs, they have to show public benefit. So I'm kind of looking at the DAs from a different angle. I'd like to weigh in on the kinds of benefit I'd like to see with the DA. And that would be potentially more housing. There's a whole list of benefits, but more housing, particularly affordable housing, would be one of those things I would be very amenable to giving more density, more height, giving, flex on the land use code. I've thought for a long time and have talked about for a long time that we need to have a DA chapter to allow us to flex the land use code, particularly for things like housing and affordable housing. This would just be like the first try at that by putting it in this overlay. So I would be in favor of that for the DA. Let me make sure I've touched everything. On the ownership, to Councilmember Zahn's point, I think we talked about having a slightly higher affordability level for ownership because we wanted to encourage the development of ownership housing, and I'm still in that camp. I don't think that it would be wise, however, for us to start adding a whole bunch more amenities. Shifting the ones that we've studied around is one thing, but adding a whole bunch of new ones, I think would be problematic for keeping on schedule, particularly ones that have to do with how a space is used versus how it's like within a zone versus how a space is developed, because land use code typically drives the height, the density, the floor plate size, how much ground space there is. They don't say that you need to rent the office space to a national tech company or only a local renter. I mean, that's just not what the land use code does. So while I completely support us using our economic development dollars to encourage more mom and pop shops, I don't think it's really something that could be easily managed in a land use code. Those are my comments, I guess. I join the other council member who asked for information. I asked this at my briefing on the difference between the two economic development studies. What's the difference and why? And then I guess I would just also add my voice to mayor and deputy mayor about being open to adding an amenity of housing or affordable housing to the commercial zone. I know that the Housing Roundtable has hired our consultant, Echo Northwest, to look at that. And if we can figure out a way to incentivize that while still having a great development here with open space and such, I think that would be a win for the people of this city. Thanks.
Can I get clarification on something that you said in the very beginning? You're talking about base and max FAR. Are you going with option B?
No, I'm going with 3535 for base, the option C, I guess, because of just it's 4 or 4.5 just across Main Street from there. It seems like 3.5 would be enough, and max of 5, but full 5, considering the critical areas.
Okay, Councilmember Stokes.
Yeah,
if you can give me the information on how you feel about the option B recommendation in your comments, I'd appreciate it.
Exactly what I was going to do. And as I said before, when I started my first comment, I said I go for option B. I do agree that to 3.5, 3.5 and leaving it 5.0. Is that what you're looking for?
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, I like the tiers. I like the way the discussion's going. On the, I'll get back to this. I want to kind of interject this before I forget it. But on the two recommendations from the consultants, I think the first one, the one that the staff put in place, actually is more thorough and more rational on this. The other, I was a little disappointed in some of the work or comments on it, and but I think overall both of them actually support what we're talking about here, so I'm not too worried about that. Sometimes, as a lawyer, you have experts on both sides, and they can't all both be right, and a lot of times it's in between. So I wouldn't get too hung up on those things. The one thing I did want to say in this and take a look at this is and particularly with the DA, and I think the DA thing is the way to go on this. Let's get this through, get the comments in place. We can't actually, dot every I and cross every T and all, and get it to the DA. And with the idea is to get this done, work on it. Let's get this thing going. And I think we're in good space on that. I would like to look at the special amenities, performing arts, and suggest that something like was done with Cloudview be a priority look at in this area. Having performing arts community space in this area is really essential, and it will make this a great project and not just a really good one. And so I would like to elevate that to something that we in the DA we look at that and utilize that, and that obviously if we go that way, it offers some amenities to the developer. So I think that's this is a place I would like to see it happen.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Lee, can you in your comments please comment on where you are with option B?
I would support stakeholders' request.
Okay.
3.5, 3.5, max 5.3. I explain to you why. I would love to have all sorts of amenities. I mean, but I'm sure all of us, all 7 of us, would like to have a lot more things we want to include, because public benefits what we're looking for. But the reality is what the project, what the developer can do. And I think I've seen, see that the thing that mentioned here is pretty consistent. I think I'm very happy that we are working together. And I think development agreement can actually do more negotiation. And we as a council can add and subtract depending on the reasonable economics, that we are looking at, real economics, not just guesses. And I think we see that Eco Northwest and Holland, that they all have differences, but that need to be worked out so that we know exactly how we are comfortable, and the staff would need to also, of course, make recommendation to us. And if it's not, we've got to figure out what is the right one. And I believe that I agree also that we need to provide more affordable housing, not provide more. We could take advantage of the non-residential development to provide more housing as well. Why not? Right? If we have opportunity to do that, if it's economically feasible, this is a benefit. Our goal is to get more housing. And so I agree with that. And the key point is ultimately, it's going to be whether it's economically feasible for this project to happen. And so, that's what I'm shooting for. So I believe that the height, that's one question I want to ask the staff. I feel to me that the stakeholder would like to have the DA to provide some certainty. What I heard at the beginning of the session is the developer like to have certainty. They don't like it to have, DA to be negotiated, and it may not happen to their, desired necessity. So are we thinking about when we have a DA that we're going to be using DA to provide increased height, or are we thinking that we don't know yet, it may not happen? So maybe the staff can say a few words about that.
So the option B, use of the DA, based on previous council direction on September 13th, was to use the DA to provide for additional height with additional affordable housing as kind of the benefit. So that would be above the max height that would be established in the code. You would have to set what's the ceiling that DA could take it to.
Which is?
Right, so.
Which is?
Well, the recommendation or the stakeholder proposal was, a request was to go to 400 feet or 420 with mechanical, right, to accomplish the kind of distribution of FAR and building density across the property. Okay. So it again, at the end, it will be the council's choice on how high they would want to go, but that was the maximum that was requested.
Okay.
Okay. Councilmember Barksdale.
All right, thank you, Mayor. Just one clarifying question or quick question for staff. In terms of incentivizing mom and pop shops, is there any way or anywhere where we are speaking to the use of the space and in the code or anywhere currently?
So I can provide a response, Councilmember Barksdale, and then it might be helpful if Emil wants to weigh in on this as well. So the land use code in downtown, for example, before downtown livability, there were certain requirements that developers could design a space for to use for retail, for example. So we had retail exemptions. What became really apparent is it gets difficult based on different development cycles when you define how a space should be used to make sure that use is always that space is consistently tenanted. And so we have had examples where, for example, a project had basically a vacant suite for almost 30 years in downtown Bellevue. They took the exemption for retail and it sat vacant. It was on the corner of 112th and Northeast 8th. So it wasn't an area that was necessarily prime for retail. So there were some challenges, though, for the developers to re-tenant that space because we were so restrictive on the use. So we have employed that before. But it is something that has its challenges. So those are things that we'd have to work through and where's the appropriate place for those items to go. And there would be some analysis that would need to go into that to make sure it's successful for the area and for future tenants as well. I don't know if Emil had anything to add with that experience.
Yeah, Councilmember Barksdale, in the formation of the Bell Red Code, we did look at some limitations on retail, especially on the 130th future shopping street out there. So if council would like, we can bring back some of the information that is in the Bell Red Code, but hasn't really pertained to redevelopment along that street yet.
Got it. So, I mean, to speak to this, I guess the dimensions that support mom and pop shops and the analysis that would be required. And maybe it's separate from, the amenity system here. I mean, I know we're talking about having a list of amenities as part of the DA that would be separate from this work. I would be interested because, I mean, if mom and pop shops are of interest and a priority through our economic development plan, at some point we're gonna have to do this. And so I'd rather figure out what that might look like, and do some of that work now. And also because I think this would be a good area for it, especially if we've also talked about sort of alleys with addresses and mom and pop shops make for really good alleys with address uses. So I'd be interested in that analysis. And then on the base FAR, I guess I'm up for the 3.5. I guess I would like to understand what that means, though, in terms of, I know the economic analysis suggested 2.5. What does that mean in terms of the amenities that we might not get if we go to 3.5 or might get? Like, can you speak a little bit more to those implications?
Like, what do we lose in terms of incentives when we bump it up without a cost or an ask?
So I think we'll probably need to come back with additional information to kind of describe the impact that lifting the base FAR 1.0 creates. So we can try to quantify that as the value. So this is an exchange of value between paying for a public benefit and being able to do it essentially without any, being able to accomplish that development level without any investment in the kind of the public amenities. So you move the base FAR up, you shrink down the amount of public benefit that will be invested in as part of the development as it advances. So we'll try to quantify that so that it's in 3.5, 2.5. Those seem like small numbers, but they are a significant move that we want to make sure we answer your question and help you understand the magnitude of that move.
Thank you.
So, yeah, I think just from the little bit I know, I'm not interested in gifting 1.0 base FAR, but I'm really interested in incentivizing it to go to the maximum.
Right.
So I think what I'm hearing from the council is just what you said, Mike, is to look at the pros and cons of starting at a higher base, but also wanting to re-examine this amenity system that we have. And I sure don't want to, I do not want to micromanage this project and get into a role that the council doesn't belong. But I think on a high level, we should be talking about a value system of what we're trying to incentivize in our developments. So I don't know if you can add another meeting that will allow us to cover that material and help us stay on schedule.
So let us, yes, I think obviously the most in-depth of the discussion that has been around the amenity system, and like you're saying, it's how you're arraying the values of those various amenities. Let us drop back and think about the feedback tonight. We heard some different proposals and we heard some different opinions about the prioritization there, so that we can come back and try to help the council revisit the amenities selections and how you want to array those. We'll see if we can work it into another meeting that we've already got scheduled. If not, we may have to find a way to squeeze another meeting in somewhere, which is getting more challenging as we head toward the end of the year. As you know, your council calendar gets pretty busy as we move toward the fall and winter here. So,
well, if you want to do individual council meetings and get feedback from each council member on their ideas of the priorities for amenities, that might be helpful for you to come back.
Agreed. And I guess the one piece of advice here, as we've already mentioned, if we're creating a new amenity that hasn't existed, it doesn't exist elsewhere in the city, we would have to go out and try to quantify, what the value of that amenity is to calibrate it. So that's additional kind of technical work we would have to do to make sure it fits. Again, it really depends on what that new amenity might be. But mostly what we've heard tonight is how we're arraying amenities that we use elsewhere in the city or that are already proposed here. So,
well, and I'll just use this moment because it's my turn to give my feedback. I appreciate the mom and pop shops. I think what is not unique is the desire to retain restaurants and shops that are on the existing property when they redevelop. And I know I've read instances where if you can provide, one of these businesses with a grant for a year to get them up to scale to a larger site and a larger clientele, that they have more chance to be successful. So kind of retaining, I know that property has, I think, 2 restaurants on it. And so finding a way to retain those and incentivize that is something maybe to look into.
Okay.
All right. I think that's a lot of information. I'm sorry we didn't come to a decision tonight, but
Mayor, were we going to go one more round? No?
Okay. All right. Yes, we are. Let's start with the deputy mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess if we're going to come back to council with some further analysis there, I think a part of that analysis has to be the neighboring zoning around East Maine, then specifically OLB South, which is 4.5. The recommendation is 2.5. I think 3.5 is a reasonable middle point that we can agree. I'm all for the incentive system, don't get me wrong, and I think we want all of those public amenities, et cetera, but I think we also need to keep in mind where this is located, who they're competing against, and what those other areas are zoned for. It also sounded as if we were starting to make some traction here in terms of that pedestrian bridge. So I would certainly like to see that I think I heard at least 3 or 4 council members that were advocating for moving at least that pedestrian bridge into that first tier. I think all recognizing both the safety implications of that, but also just the fact that it might be critical to the success of this project as well. But if we feel like we need another meeting, I'm fine with that. I just don't want us to get off track where we're not hitting that December 6th deadline anymore. So if we can do that, that'd be great. Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Zahn.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. You know, we talked a lot about downtown and OLB, and what I think about is that this is the first of talking about transit-oriented development where Wilburton and Bell Red look back. And so whatever we make decisions about here related to, do we look at a FAR of 5 with or without the critical areas? I think this is really potentially setting the stage for how we look at those other areas. So I just would make sure that we're careful as we look at this, that as you mentioned, Mayor, that we're not moving from a 2.5 that the financial analysis shows to a 3.5 without really understanding what public benefit we are not getting, because potentially this sets the tone for other areas. And then I just want to make sure that I was clear about, Mayor, your comment about affordable housing component in non-residential. So are we saying that within the residential properties, there would be a mixed use where residential would be in there? So potentially, as we consider going from a 2.5 to a 3.5 on the non-res, that one of the pieces of public benefit we might be asking for is affordable housing. So I'm just trying to understand what that concept is.
I think the example I was envisioning was if they were to carve off a piece of property and ask an affordable housing developer to come in and develop on it, on the site. So, but the incentive would be in the non-residential part.
Okay, well, that's helpful to understand. Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Robertson.
Thanks. So I thought I heard 4, if not 5 council members express support for 3.5, 3.5.
You heard 3.5.
Yeah, well, and I thought I heard
we heard Deputy Mayor support, Councilmember Robertson and Lee support, and Councilmember Barksdale wanted to get more information.
Right. I was going to ask Councilmember Stokes because he said he supported B, but then he said 3.5, 3.5, and I don't know if he misspoke or I didn't understand. So maybe
I said it very clearly. You just missed it. Okay. There. Yeah.
Okay.
That's easy.
Are you 2.5, 3.5 or 3.5, 3.5?
3.5, 3.5.
Okay, so we have 4.5.
I don't have a problem with that.
So yeah,
I thought you said, I'm sorry, Councilmember Stokes, I thought you said you were for option B. So now I'm
said, but I did come in the other discussion point, I said with 3.5, 3.5.
Okay,
at some point in the conversation. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on. That's fine.
No,
but I'm saying right now, 3.5, 3.5.
Thank you. That's what I thought you said, but I
missed that.
Yeah,
so,
it's okay.
Thanks, Councilmember Stokes. So I think we have a support for the 3.5, 3.5.
Yeah, I think you do too.
I also thought we had support for moving the PED bridge to tier 1. I also heard support for at least being open to have an affordable housing amenity for the commercial, as you so ably described, Mayor. The other thing I thought I heard support for was to have the DA be a little bit more expansive, to be able to, this is, we're doing this overlay. If we don't have it exactly right, we can flex that, but of course we need to have those public benefits. So I would be very interested in understanding the will of the council on that. With regard to whether we need another meeting or not, we may need another meeting to stay on track anyway, but for me, the incentive system is good as it is, and with maybe those 2 little tweaks of moving the PED bridge up and moving on, because we need to make decisions and move on in order to stay on track. So I think I covered everything. On the max density, I'd like to figure out a way to make it a full 5.0. So thanks.
Okay, Councilmember Stokes, do you want to speak again?
Oh yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, and the 5.0 also, make sure that's clear. So let me ask this question. Why, if we raise the FAR from 2.5 to 3.5, what if we kept it at 2.5 and we wanted to go with these incentives? If we raise it 3.5, why doesn't that increase the incentives as well? I mean, I thought that was a part of the point of that. So, I mean, are you saying if we only have 0.5? I mean, explain the relationship there a little better because I think we're all saying we want more of these things in the first and second tiers, and that should come from benefits given in the FAR. And I thought that was what we were talking about to a certain extent. What's wrong with that?
Me to respond?
Yeah, Mike, you should explain. Yeah, thank you.
So, Nick, can you go up to the basic FAR slide so we can talk about this really quick? Or Trisna, whoever, I think Trisna, you've got the slides. So that one will work. So when we're talking about the non-residential, it's the center bar. The base FAR is set at 2.5. So in the draft code. So the base FAR gives the developer the right to build that level of density, 2.5, feet per square foot of land, without any additional cost to do public amenities. So the light blue bar above that is the additional lift, the 2.5 additional lift that they can do to add density. But to add that density in that light blue bar, they have to pay for the public amenities. So it's open space, childcare, and the other options that are in the tiers. So in the amenity list. So if you raise the 2.5 up, then what you're doing is you're reducing the amount of incentive that they have to pay for. So you won't get as many amenities as you would if you're required to do that extra lift from 2.5 up. So you're shrinking down the cost to the developer to provide those amenities, and it will reduce the amount of public amenities that we would get in that development based on the code application. So the more you shrink the light blue bar at the top by raising the base, the less public amenities they will be obligated to provide, is a short way to say it.
That really would have helped to have had that explained at the beginning. And maybe I'm the only one that didn't understand it, but that doesn't seem to make sense. If we agree to raise the FAR from 2.5 to 3.5 in a development agreement, then there should be additional benefit. I mean, that doesn't make sense.
So the question on the table was to outright raise the base FAR, not using a development agreement, but just in the code, give that right to develop. That would be this option, raise the base to 3.5. It would reduce the amount of that additional FAR that's required through the amenities system. So they wouldn't be required to provide as much open space or childcare or the potential street amenity to accomplish that maximum FAR of 5.0. So it really is, this is the calibration. The basic question is, where does the value go? So the way this was calibrated was there was that public value that was captured from the increased value by increasing the development potential or density allowed in the East Maine area.
Okay. That didn't really sound entirely rational, I have to admit. I mean, it doesn't resonate. I mean, if you giving basic FAR is giving on a higher benefit to the developer.
That's correct.
And which means, well, And so in return for that, it would seem rational to, as you increase the FAR, you would have some increase in the return benefit to the community. And so I think this makes it take another look at how we approach this.
Well, that's the question. Do you want to give them unearned increased FAR, or do you want them to earn that FAR that they're
I thought
asking?
that's what I'm sorry, Miss. I just thought that's what we were talking about, because there was language in our conversation that seemed to indicate that. So I think this has been a little fuzzy. And I think
there's two questions. One is, where do we start, which is the base FAR, and two, how far can you go using the amenity system, which is the max FAR.
Right.
And the question on the table, if you go back to the other chart, Mike, is staff is recommending that we start at 2.5. I think is that for office, and 3.5 for housing, and they can go to F5.0 max. And the stakeholder is requesting that their base be at 3.5, so that they get kind of a free 1.0 FAR in office without any amenities, without anything. And so we have the opportunity to decide what the base will be and what the max will be. So you had said before you wanted to go with the 3.535.
Because I was under the wrong assumption that there would be some additional benefit out of that. I don't know. I'm just trying to think this through, because we're making a big decision. We're talking about a lot of amenities and things too, and all of which make this a better development than just building.
Well, I'll tell you what. I'll let everybody go around, and then we'll go roll call what your final preference is on this, okay? So you can hear everybody's discussion. Councilmember Lee?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm still going for 3.5, 3.5, and max 5.3 with one question. Staff, what's the major difference of 5.3 and 5.0? Then I will make a comment. Yeah, tell me 5.0 and 5.3.
Well,
I know what it means in terms of getting incentives, but I'm just wondering, what's this 0.3? What difference would that make?
Well, first of all, it allows for a significant additional level of density. So more square footage can be built as a result of any incremental increase in the base, in the maximum FAR that's allowed.
Okay.
The other challenge is that level's setting that as the maximum in the code would require that we have to do a little bit more process work related to the environmental review. That's why we did make the recommendation that if you want to increase the maximum above 5.0, that we would use a development agreement as the mechanism to do that, and then quantify the public amenity that would come with that additional density.
Okay, so I'm flexible on that. I can go with 5.0, 5.3, doesn't matter. I believe that the developer has already made a lot of agreement to do all the amenities, as we can see, in the chart that I noticed. Our recommendation is not that much different than what the developer has agreed to do. And so I think it really ultimately depends on, working with the credible, trustworthy developer that's willing to provide public benefits. And I think what they want to do is make sure they minimize the risk of making this budget become a reality. If there are too many things that they got their hands tied and realistic, they're not going to do it. Or if they do it, they won't make any money. In that case, we don't get any amenities. So I believe that, they are willing to negotiate, especially if it's a council, option. We can always ask. And if they're the people that we believe and trust, and they have a good project we want, I think we can realize those things. As I mentioned, I would like to a lot more. The question is, what realistically can we get? And I think this is one way to encourage a developer that wants to do it and wants to serve the community, wants to do a project so they can be in business for a long time. And that's what we've seen in the city of Bellevue. We got great, great people who have made it happen. So I stay with Jennifer Dunn, Robertson. Sorry, I promoted you.
Oh my. Okay, thank you, Councilmember Lee. Okay, Councilmember Barksdale.
Nothing different from my previous comments, Mayor. Thank you.
So you're not settled on either. You want more information?
On what we would be giving up in terms of amenities, yes. Thank you.
Okay, well, I'm solid on the 2535 max 50. And so let's go through. I think we're going to end up at split, but we'll do it anyway. Deputy Mayor.
3.5, 3.5. And then the max 5, and then the other request was moving pedestrian bridge over to first tier.
Okay. Councilmember Zahn.
Yes, I support option B with the 2.5 and the 5.0. And if we did decide, and one of the things we can do as part of a DA is consider then a 3.5 base with whatever amenities might be offered, and potentially that 5.3 max, maybe because we're not counting the wetland and the streams, that one of the mandatory amenities is the stream and wetlands work, because if we are gonna choose to not count the wetlands, then the development, I think, should be accounting for some stream and wetland type of restoration. And I also believe that if we are going to go up to the 3.5, then we need to be looking at the mom and pop, because without this as an incentive, we will never get to affordable retail spaces for these small incubator mom and pop places. And these tough things are what government is equipped to do, because otherwise the market won't do it. Thank you.
Well, can you tell me 2.5 or 3.5, because that's really the question on the table right now.
Okay.
I know you said 3.5 if they mom and pop, but let's say what's 2.5.
2.5.
Okay. All right, Councilmember Robertson.
3.5, 3.5 max full FAR 5, and moving the PED bridge up, and also allowing greater flexibility on the DA process.
Councilmember Stokes.
So additional flexibility in the DA process would not include some more incentives for raising the base for the FAR.
The incentives don't come into play until you go beyond the base. So if you raise the base, it has nothing to do with incentives.
Well, but it is an incentive. We know that. I mean, it's I'll stick at 2.5 for tonight. Let me think about this. I'm a little. I mean, we're kind of pushing it at ourselves on this whole piece. 5.0, and I like the incentives. I do think taking into account special amenities and performing arts is a priority for me to work that in. And otherwise, I'm fine with it.
Okay, Councilmember Lee.
3.5, maximum 5.0, and DA for flexibility, for height, and for all the amenities.
And Councilmember Barksdale.
So option B as stated, and I'm still interested in mom and pop shops.
Okay, and I'm option B as stated. So 1, 2, 3, 4 for option B, and then come back to us to talk about the incentives, because we're all over the place, and that's fine. But we need to have re-examine our incentive program, I guess.
Okay, we can certainly do that based on tonight's feedback to try to organize some different options for council consideration.
Okay, so I wonder if you can make a motion, Deputy Mayor. I know this one's a tough one. I think the first line and a half, and then add, or maybe just stop at FAR of 5.0, and then staff has direction to come back to discuss the amenity system. Does that sound, is that a reasonable thing to do, to come out with a motion just for the first sentence to be ending at FAR of 5.0 in the recommended option?
Mayor, are you asking me or are you asking Mike?
I'm asking the city clerk and Mike.
We'll have to decide.
First, you have to, the document that you're looking at is the agenda memo. Is that what you're referring to?
It would read to direct staff to incorporate option B of base FAR of 2.5 for non-residential, 3.5 for residential development with a maximum FAR of 5.0, because that's like the only thing we decided on for 3 tonight. The rest would be, do we ask in the motion for you to come back and for more discussion on the amenity system, or is that just enough of a motion for you and you know to come back?
We would know to come back with the amenities. I think that the discussion there has been pretty clear that you're looking for some additional information.
Yeah. So Deputy Mayor, did you have a question?
Mayor?
Well, I just think that the vote might be a bit premature because we do have some council members asking for additional information, I think, before they would vote for 2.5 or 3.5 potentially. And I think that's some of the.
That's not what I heard, but.
Well, I think Councilmember Stokes certainly.
Well, listen, let's make the motion and we'll see how the vote goes, because he has the opportunity to vote however he chooses. Councilmember Stokes, did you have one more question?
Yeah, I think at this point, forcing the vote at this point where there is a question is really not helpful, because then we're stuck. We can't go back and unvote it. If we want to have a collaborative working relationship on this, then let's do that. If we just want to take a vote, I can't abstain because it'll be counted one way. And I have a serious question, and I think there's no rush on the time. This is not going to change the dynamics on this.
I didn't know you had a serious question that was precluding you from being able to vote, and that's a different situation.
Well, because I said I want to.
It's okay.
Yeah,
so,
okay,
Mike, it sounds like we'll have to come back and re-examine this, and hopefully you can meet with various council members and get their questions answered, so that we can at some point take a vote, an educated vote, and move forward on this.
Mm-hmm. We are certainly happy to meet with council members. We recognize this can be very confusing and complicated, so appreciate the work working through to where we are. So absolutely ready to support you as you continue your deliberation and getting to decisions.
Okay, well, thank you everybody for your good discussion, and our meeting is adjourned. We'll see you next week.